I'd like to start off the evening with a moment of silence for our fallen service members. Thank you. So this evening, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Gina O'Toole. I am a member of Concerned Citizens of Lynn. I am a resident, and I have been since my husband and I bought our home back in 1993. I love the city of Lynn. I enjoy the people that live here, and I am anxiously awaiting some major changes to be made, as well as I know a lot of people in this room. So I'd like to introduce my co-moderator, Adriana Paz, at the head table, and we also have Wendy Pena and Kathleen McCarthy. I almost couldn't see her. And our timekeeper tonight will be Valerie Vong. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. And our three guests, our running for mayor, we have our city council president, Darren Cyr, Lynn School Committee member, attorney Jared Nicholson, and school committee member, attorney Michael Satterwhite. And thank you for all coming tonight. So tonight I just want to let everyone know that the Concerned Citizens of Lynn received over 100 questions. So of course we know with time constraints we're not going to be able to get to all of these questions. So the questions came in, they were sorted through, some of them were combined because a lot of questions sometimes can be similar. And our candidates each have questions of their own they need to be, that they can ask the other candidates. So, and we all ask that cell phones be silenced tonight in the audience, and we want to make sure that each candidate has the attention and respect of everyone in the room, which I know that we can all do that. So we're going to start off tonight with our first question.
One, I don't need a mic, I don't think. One, to the Lynn Museum for letting us have this here. Everyone that submitted questions, thank you so much. She already introduced you to everyone. We have LCTV in the house, he's taping. We'll be ready in an hour, right, Sept?
What?
Be ready in an hour? A couple of days. We have, where's Jonathan? He's hiding. Jonathan Feinberg from the New Lynn Coalition. Live streaming on Facebook for us. Last but not least, Kyle, the real, you're from Lynn. I want to do a special thank you to Joanne Linda for everything she did to help me. And of course, we have Wendy Pena, Kathy, everybody that helped set up, Marissa running to the dog store last minute. And a special thank you to all three candidates for coming and doing this. I thank you very much.
Lisa Pressman. That's her name. She didn't introduce herself. All right, so I have the first question, and we're going to start with Darren Cyr. All right. If you become mayor of Lynn, what would be your first issue? What would be the first issue your administration would begin to address?
Schools. Do you want me to explain what I would do? So in the next several years, if we don't do something about our schools, come up with a real comprehensive plan as to how to fix them. We have 28 schools in the city of Lynn. 50% of them are well over 100 years old. Those buildings are going to wind up becoming condemned. They're not, in my opinion, it's unsatisfactory that those are the conditions of our schools. I truly believe that education is the way to get people out of poverty. I believe it's the way to get people to get higher paying jobs. And you don't need a college education in order to do that. We have an unbelievable trade school. Perfect example is Marshall Middle School. Several years ago, we got a brand new school in the city. It's a $100 million school. When I first became councilor, that was the biggest issue in Ward 3. And all the residents in that area wanted a new school. So what we started doing was holding neighborhood meetings in that area. We got all the residents on board with it, school committee members, the mayor's office, and all the rest of the council. And we got ourselves a school that's used as an example for the rest of the state. Kids were going to the old Marshall, which was Eastern Junior High when I went there. It was in such deplorable conditions that you felt like you were going to reform school every single day. The building was built ahead of schedule. After it was built, the kids were able to leave during April vacation and come back at the end of April vacation into a new school. And you could see the attitudes of all the kids and the teachers in that building change. It was like a miracle happening. You walk into any room in that building and you think you're walking onto a college campus. They have an unbelievable media room. Thank you.
All right, well, first I just want to say thank you so much to the concerned citizens of Lynn for hosting Lynn Museum, for having us, to all of you for being here. And, I think my top priority, I absolutely agree that the schools are a top priority, and I'll broaden that just to say I think infrastructure in the city. We're about to have a tremendous opportunity over the next few years to make a once-in-a-generation investment in our city's infrastructure. And it absolutely needs it. You drive around the city, you see the conditions of the roads and the sidewalks, the city's buildings and equipment, our parks. There's a backup of deferred maintenance, and that absolutely includes the schools. And we need to, as a city, over the next couple of years, really put our best foot forward to make the most of this opportunity that we have, the infrastructure dollars that are coming our way, that are becoming available. That's going to require real collaboration with our state and federal partners, and that's one of the reasons I'm excited to have the support of Senator Crichton and my campaign, the endorsement of Congressman Moulton, because that kind of partnership is really going to unlock the opportunities that we need with the federal money that's coming our way. With the schools particularly, absolutely a top issue. Not only are there inadequate facilities, but they're overcrowded. And that's one of the big drivers of the fact that we have large class sizes, that we don't have buildings big enough to hold the classrooms that we need. And under the current Massachusetts School Building Authority system, we'd be lucky to build a new school every 5 years. And so one of my top priorities is going to be working with other stakeholders to make sure that we can take advantage of this opportunity that we're having with infrastructure money and be able to build schools quicker to meet the needs that we have to deliver the kind of education that our students deserve in Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And the moment I get into City Hall, I'm going to start addressing the inequities, and everything falls right within that. So we're talking about schools, we're talking about even our COVID response that we still are dealing with, because it's still out there and it's still something that we're having to combat. So the inequities in our cities is a huge thing, and that falls into the four things that I talk about every single day on my campaign: the accessibility, the affordability, the activities, and public safety within our city. Those are all four key things that our city needs to address right away. We've suffered for too long. We've been in way too many short-term crises, and it's now time to have a long-term solution to these particular issues. So the moment I get in, I'm going to meet with the stakeholders throughout the city and actually talk about the issues and see what resolutions we have out there, because it's important to come to a consensus in order to get buy-in from the community. We're one city. So when I say every ward, every resident, and every business, I mean that. And that's where I'm going to direct my communications with, because that's where it matters, the people that impacts the most. So we're going to address the inequities that we see every single day and what COVID helped enhance. I've lived through it. I lived through the things that COVID enhanced. I know what it feels like. So what we need to do is we need to address it now. We have a substantial amount of federal funds coming in, and our budget needs to speak to what we deem important in the city. And that's what I will do. The first day I get in there is work on the inequities. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to put my hand in a little bit. This is a multi-part question, and we're going to start with Jared this time. So you'll get 1 additional minute to answer the first question, each part, I guess, which is 3 minutes each part of this question. So, all the talks about new schools in the city and explaining and or why fixing others. How do you plan to pay for these schools' plans without killing the citizens of Lynn with bond after bond? Jared.
Great. So this is the first part. This is the first part. So we have 3 minutes for the
Yes.
first part. Okay, great. Yeah, absolutely. You know, this is obviously a top issue. We were just talking about it. You know, the way that schools are built in Massachusetts is primarily through the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And that's under the state treasury, and they provide reimbursements for districts that are building schools. And the reimbursements are set at a percentage of the cost of the school. They're set at a percentage that's specific to each community based on the resources that that community has to draw on to fund schools. So a district like Lynn, as you can imagine, has a high reimbursement rate from the MSBA. So the short answer is that we're going to be working with the MSBA to make sure that we can fund these schools and get the resources we need to do it. The longer answer is that under the current system, there's fixes that are required to the way that the Massachusetts School Building Authority funds the school process. And we need to push to make those changes in order for Lynn to be able to keep pace with the construction. That was something I mentioned earlier, talking about infrastructure. So, for example, there is a cap on the percentage that a district is reimbursed at 80%. So even though the formula, based on the resources that we have in Lynn, the city's income and assets, even though the resources are low, there's an arbitrary cap of 80%. That cap should be lifted. That's going to require change to state law. That's state legislation. The state house needs to pass it. The governor needs to sign it. And so one key priority for my work as mayor is going to be supporting that kind of legislation to reform the school building funding formula so that we can afford to make these changes, so that we can afford to build the schools that we need and not relying entirely on the Lynn taxpayer. And that's something I've already been doing. As a member of the school committee, I published an op-ed in Commonwealth Magazine a few months ago in support of this legislation that would reform the way that schools are paid for, because under the current system, we're just not going to be able to afford to keep pace with the cost of construction. The other thing that's really important when we think about how we're going to make this work is getting everything on our side right. So running a process where we can put our best foot forward and tell the state we are ready to deliver this process, and we're going to get everybody on board in the beginning. In order to do that, you have to have real transparency. And transparency means being proactive about communicating and drawing people in before decisions are made. That's how you get transparency. And so I think by continuing to make the most of the opportunities that we have and then making the case for the resources that we need is how we're going to be able to tackle this. Thank you.
So I totally screwed that up. It was supposed to be like an extra. An additional minute to, you would have 3 minutes, so it's a minute and a half for the first question and a minute and a half for the second.
What was the second question?
It's coming. All right, so Jared, this is part 2.
Okay.
How many bonds are outstanding for the city, and when will they finally be paid off? And how do these loans, bonds, affect the property tax rate increases?
So this is a minute and a half for this one. A minute.
2 minutes.
2
We'll
minutes.
give you a 2 for this. I totally screwed that up. So it's
Yeah, no, not at all, not at all. I don't have the exact number of how many bonds that are outstanding, but absolutely it affects the city's tax rate. The good news is that we are coming into some opportunities with debt that's being serviced that's expiring. So we're going to have the borrowing capacity that we need to do these kinds of projects. But when you think about borrowing, you're thinking about two different things. One, what capacity do we have from a lender's point of view? How much are they willing to lend us? And then two, the debt service costs. So, and that's an impact on our budget because the debt service payment is annual. And so not only do we need to be careful about how much total debt we can carry, but what that's going to mean for the periodic payments and the impact on our budget month to month, year to year. And so we do have the borrowing capacity that we need, and that's the good news. We still need to be careful in terms of the effect that these interest payments have on the budget, but the good news is that we're going to have some availability as well. I mean, part of the issues that we've running into is that we haven't been making the investments in our capital infrastructure that we're supposed to be making. And so there's these deferred maintenance costs. And because of some great news in our fiscal situation over the last few years in terms of improving budgetary outlook, and because of some of the coming investments that we're going to be having from the state and federal government, we're going to be having more opportunities to make those kinds of long-term investments in our capital needs, the streets, the sidewalks, city building, equipment, and we got to make the most of those opportunities.
Thank you. Michael? If you need me to repeat the question, I can.
Yes, please.
Okay. So the first 3-minute answer will be, how do you plan to pay for school plans without killing the citizens of Lynn with bond after bond?
We need the MSBA. It's plain and simple. I know that Jared just spoke about the work that he wants to do with both with the state and federal officials. I believe we all want to work with them because it's our job to advocate for the inequities that obviously we face here in our city. And the formula for the MSBA, if you look at the cost for the Marshall Middle School, we were promised that it would be an 80-20 split, but it wasn't. It was more like 40-60. And that put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths because they were told one thing and it ended up being something completely different. So the school that we had after the fact was Pickering, and both Jared and Darren were elected officials at the time. And that push to get the new middle school obviously failed. But that was due more so towards miscommunication and the lack of collaboration with the communities. And they had a big pushback with those people that lived on Parkland Ave. And they reached out to everybody in the city, and it failed. So we need a mayor that understands that communication is very important and that voices actually matter. Because those are the people that actually go out and vote, and we need the city's buy-in. It's vital to have the community buy into what we plan to do. We have a lot of schools that we need to rebuild, and we can't do it on our own. We desperately need the MSBA, and that's why working with Jared on the school committee, we were happy to finally get back into it because we tried a few times and they did not. They said we weren't ready because of the fiscal mismanagement of our city just 3 years ago, where we had to borrow $14 million from the state to balance 2 fiscal budgets. So that set us back. It really did. People don't realize it, but it did. It set us back a substantial period of time. So yeah, we need to get funding from MSBA. We're going to need to possibly borrow. I know that we have some money in our general fund that we could definitely use if need be, but we're going to need to go back to the public and better explain why it's a better investment to have better schools for our students as opposed to the buildings that we currently have housed. My daughter goes to Pickering, and I went to Pickering. It was bad when I went there in 1997. So for her to go there, it's bad. And I was speaking to someone whose daughter went to Pickering, and she used to come home and hack all through the night. And then last year, while she was remote, didn't happen not one time. And that's why I pushed every single day on the school committee for the ventilation report and the air quality report, because I know what these buildings are doing to our residents, and we have to do something about it right away. So yes, we need to get back, and we need to start pushing for a more equitable MSBA. Thank you.
Okay, so part 2. How many bonds are outstanding for the city, and when will they finally be paid off? And how do these loans, bonds affect the property tax rates and increases?
Obviously, when you borrow money, you have to pay it back, and there's interest. So we had a debate just a few days ago with the seniors, and one of the things that I looked into was if we had borrowing capacity at this point to actually buy a senior center, because we're in desperate need of it. And I spoke to Mike, and he told me that we do have the capacity to borrow. We have about 52 outstanding bonds. I believe it's 52 or 53 million dollars, and it leaves room within the city to borrow to pay for things like new schools, as well as a senior center that we're so hopeful to have. So it's vital for us to make sure that we're responsible with what we're borrowing. And I know that during the debate we had talked about our credit rating here in the city and how it got back up, which was very important. So it's important to continue to be on top of these things and to be honest with our community, and to make sure that, again, any money we're spending is done in a fiscal way, one that is responsible, and one that keeps into mind that it's not me paying it back. I'm the mayor, but it's all of you, the residents. So it's vital to be open, honest, and transparent with the population that we serve. Again, because it's their money that we're spending. So that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Darren, do you want me to repeat the question? I know it's-
So, right off the bat, our school budget is 2/3 of our city budget. And we bring in roughly about $150 to $160 million in tax revenue. And our budget for this fiscal year alone is over $410 million. If it weren't for the state coming in and helping us out, we wouldn't be able to set a balanced budget every year. That being said, if we were allowed by the MSBA to use a portion of net school spending to build our new schools, we'd be able to do it. But the problem is they won't allow us to do it. We've reached out to them. The state senator, state reps have been trying to do this. I don't know how they're going to do it tomorrow. So when I say we have to come up with a comprehensive plan, if you take a look at, we have 28 schools in our city. There's only 2 other communities that have more schools than us in the state. We have to maintain those buildings and we have to fix them. So one of the things that we have to do is come up with a plan. And it makes sense to me in talking with our CFO and other people. If you look at other communities, what winds up happening is, or what they're doing now to help alleviate the cost of education, is they're combining resources with other cities and towns. And they're sending their kids further away for education. I'm not saying we do that in Lynn, because what we can do in Lynn is we can come up with locations and take 2 or 3 elementary schools and combine them into one. And you could build one state-of-the-art building at the same cost that it would wind up costing us to build one other school. It's $100 million to build a school. The MSBA says that they're going to give us 80%, and they don't. They give us around 60% per square foot is what they do. And there are other things that are in there that they don't cover. So I've always said that transparency is the way to get the community on board. That's how we built Marshall Middle School. It's how we're going to build the next schools.
Okay, so the second part to that question is, how many bonds are outstanding for the city, and when will they finally be paid off? And how do these loans, bonds affect the property tax rates and increases?
So our tax rate was a lot higher in 2016 than it is today. Our tax rate every year, the CFO and the treasurer come in front of the council and they set the tax rate. What the city council does is set it at the lowest possible tax rate that we can do. It's around $13 a thousand right now, whereas several years ago was $16. So the real issue with taxes is our property values keep going up because they're going up in all the surrounding communities. So for bonds, I'm not sure if there's 52 outstanding bonds, but I do know this, that the bond on Marshall Middle School is just about paid off. I know that our bond rating has gone up. It was a B a few years ago, now it's an A. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when I first became council president, we're at a $9 million deficit. The mayor and myself and the council sat down 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes on a daily basis. We were able to find the funds without laying anybody off. When Mayor McGee came in, we borrowed $14 million. $7 million of that $14 million from 4 years ago has been paid off. It makes more fiscal sense, and our taxes aren't being raised because of our bonds, but it makes fiscal sense for us to continue to pay off that $7 million over the time given to us, rather than pay it off with the $28 million that we have in our reserve account.
Thank you. So our next question is,
All right, and this one, Michael will start. Considering the past administration was rarely visible and accessible, what are your commitments to more transparency and making your administration available for public forums and access?
Great question. Literally, my slogan is a voice for you, and it's not by mistake. If you look at the logo for my campaign, it's a dome, and you see that there's a missing piece in that dome. If you look under the word you, that piece is there. The piece that is missing in our city government is you. So when I say every ward, every resident, every business, I mean that. As a mayor, I will get out there and meet once a month in a different ward to hear the feedback. I say this often. In order to succeed as a city, we need to know the pulse of the city. And for way too long, we've been told what we need to do as a city, as opposed to asking the people that it impacts the most what we should be doing. And that's why we get pushback. That's why we get division. That's why we don't get buy-in on the things that we need to do. We can't continue to do business as usual in the city anymore. These short-term crises, the mistrust, the mismanagement, all needs to stop. Someone had this slogan recently for me, and it was brilliant. But you can't have an old key open up a new door. We can't keep on doing the stuff that we've been doing. We need to get rid of it. We deserve better. I tell people every single day, the people in Lynn have to work 5 times harder than our neighboring cities. The police, the fire, we have old infrastructure for emergency services, old schools for our teachers and our students. Our businesses, there's not disposable income out there like in other cities, so they have to work 5 times harder for them to make payroll every single week. I know how that feels. And that's why I'm going to get out there every single month and meet in every single ward and be accessible like I am today. Look at my record on the school committee, and you'll see I say what I mean. Thank you.
Darren?
So I'm sorry, I heard the end of it, but I didn't hear the first part.
I can repeat it. Considering the past administration was rarely visible and accessible, what are your commitments to more transparency and making your administration available for public forums and access?
So, right off the bat, no one's more frustrated than I am with the communication that's gone on between the mayor's office and the council. For 4 years, we continuously reached out to the mayor and asked him to include us in his weekly meetings. He would not include the council. Part of that reason being, I believe, is because I don't agree with all of his politics. And if you're the mayor of the city of Lynn, regardless of whether we agree on something or we disagree on something, I represent everyone in the city. And they all deserve the right to be able to sit at the table, no matter what that issue may be. So one of the things that one of my favorite words is compromise. And the reason I say that is because 20, 30, 40% of something is better than 100% of nothing. And I'm going to give you an example. We're receiving $18 million from the CARES Act. We're going to wind up, in the end, getting $180 million. Any money that comes into the city has to be accepted through the Ways and Means, the city council. Then the mayor's allowed to spend that money if he brings it to the Ways and Means. So I made a stipulation that any money coming into the city any expenditures has to go through Ways and Means after we accept that money. He vetoed that bill because he has his own wish list. Now, every ward and every neighborhood has its own issues, and the reason why I wanted it to go through the council is because the council is aware of that. The city ward councilors are in contact every day with their constituents, holding neighborhood meetings, finding out what the issues may be. Thank you.
Okay.
No, Jared.
Oh, Jared, I'm so sorry.
No problem. Yeah.
Jumping the gun.
All right, well, thank you. So I think the first thing I'll talk about for transparency is communicating information early and often in the process. And I mentioned that a little bit when we talked about the school information. And letting people know when a decision is coming, asking for their input early before things have been decided. And, being really open and honest about our vulnerabilities. I think that's an important part of transparency as well. When we say, we have to build all these schools, under the current system, we wouldn't be able to build schools at the pace we need for us to be able to do that. We should be open and honest about that to help build our case for reform. Another key part of transparency in the city of Lynn is language access. There's so many folks in this city that English is not their first language. If we want to give them access to our information, if we want to include them in our decisions, we need to make it possible for them to participate in their language. And that takes a lot of work. And it takes resources. You have to hire people that speak the language. You have to invest in technology to make it possible. But that has to be a priority, and it has to be a priority of the mayor. This is something that's been important to us as we're campaigning. I speak Spanish, and we've been working hard to make our materials available in Spanish. And in City Hall, it's English and Spanish. There's other languages as well that are spoken in the city. And that is got to be a priority, and it's a culture that needs to be embedded in everything we do about making things accessible in multiple language. Another key part of transparency in today's age is technology. The city's website needs to be updated. It needs to be easier to access the information you're looking for, to give feedback, to find the person you're looking for. And, this is a resource issue. This is something that we need to invest in. And, I say all the time that if City Hall is our physical presence in the community, the city website is our digital presence in the community. And it's really important that we maintain it and we take care of it. We also need to go out and reach people where they're at. That's an important part of transparency as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't want another two-part question.
Let's hope.
It is.
I'm sorry.
So there's a little bit of a preview before I ask the questions. It's about Lynn Auditorium. As many know, concerned citizens of Lynn wanted to hold this event at City Hall Auditorium. Much searching was done by both the legal department and the clerk's office to make sure there were no ordinances that didn't allow such an event. No ordinances, according to both departments, existed to prevent this. We were told we would have to pay at-cost expenses that would be roughly $2,500 to $3,000 to use the auditorium. 8 hours later, we were told no, because if we allowed this for you, we would have to allow other Lynn groups also. These are the two questions, and I think we're going to start with Darren this time, right? So number one, why are the tax-paying residents not being allowed to use City Hall when we are willing to pay the expenses? And then number two, where do all the profits from the wonderful concerts and events go to, and how were they spent?
So I'll answer the second part first if I can, because I
Sure.
have a better understanding on that. All the money that is made goes right back into the auditorium and the entertainment they bring in. They try to keep the ticket costs down so that they can bring in the larger acts that they do. Before the pandemic hit, because of the work that Jamie Marsh had been doing, we were going to have over 80 shows in the city of Lynn. That is unbelievable. And then the pandemic hit. I go to several shows myself every year, and the auditorium is packed. You can't go anywhere else. It's probably one of the better assets that we have in the city that's come to light. And just to give you an example, it goes all the way back to Mayor McManus. When he was in office, that's when we started the discussions about using the auditorium to bring in live shows and live acts. And there was a lot of issues back then because it was dedicated to the veterans of the city. And they weren't sure. It took them a while to find out whether or not they were going to be able to even do that. But it's worked out unbelievably. There is no ordinance whether or not there was a legality, and that's why the law office made the decision they did. I'm not an attorney, and I couldn't give you that answer.
Thank you. Jared?
Thank you. Well, first I'd like to thank Lynn Museum for hosting us. And, I also was not involved in the decision, but what I will say is that this is absolutely something that we can work on as a city, is to making sure that public buildings are able to be used by the public. And that's not to say that there aren't real issues that you need to work through in order for that to happen. Sometimes there's insurance questions, sometimes there's the fairness questions if there's a political event. There's sometimes conflicts with other uses or conflicts with other events that are happening around town. These are all issues that we need to work through, but we should be able to work through them. I don't know what the particulars were around this situation, so I don't want to comment on that particularly. But generally, I think this is one of those issues that related to what we were just talking about with transparency and making information available. Because I think sometimes buildings could be used if people had an easy way to figure out to see when it was available, what the process was. They would go through the process. They would get the insurance they need. They would make the reservation that they need. They would hire the coverage that they need if that was whatever the issue was. But it's hard to find that information. It's hard to get it out there, and I think that's one of the reasons why an update of the city's website would be really helpful, because you could go to the city's website and see what the steps would be. And that's true of the city's auditorium, but also other public buildings as well, and parks that we want to make available, because public assets should be used by the public.
Thank you. Michael?
Thank you. Great question. So I've been saying this for as long as I can remember. When I hear the word public property, it really is a disservice, because we should be saying it's our property, literally. We used to have multiple libraries. We used to have things to do in the city, and we just sold it off because of these continued short-term crises. So the thing that boggles my mind is we were reached out by the Lynn item to do a debate, and they actually suggested using the auditorium. So how that was a suggestion from a different entity, and that was a door that was shut on by concerned citizens of Lynn, seems to me as an equity problem, and that's an issue. I do want to say that the auditorium is great, but some people still can't afford to go there. So we can't just have it for these particular shows. We have some talented local people here that they could break through if they had a platform like we have for the Lynn Auditorium. And that is what needs to be changed. We talk about where the money's going. That's a very good question. And, Council President Cyr said that it goes right back into the department. And that's good. But we need to see changes to that particular department. So, again, it's more inclusive. So it also includes the people that live here. I'm looking in the audience, I see different people that do different things in our city, and they could benefit from using it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this question, we're starting with Jared. The city of Lynn lost Lynn Hospital years ago, and now Union Hospital. We do not feel the city did enough to fight to keep a hospital here in Lynn. The so-called urgent care is a joke, as they are not even able to administer IV fluids. Do you have any plans towards at least getting this large city a full-service emergency room?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so this is absolutely something that we need to be talking about. I mean, for one of the lessons learned of the pandemic, I think, is how closely the city needs to be able to work with healthcare providers to keep our city safe. And I think one of the positive developments coming out of that is that the city was working really closely with the Lynn Community Health Center. And so I think there's momentum there. There's opportunities to partner in different ways that I think we should be continuing to strengthen that relationship and strengthen that partnership. The Lynn Community Health Center has a great relationship with the Lynn Public Schools, with the school-based health centers, and which I think offers a lot of opportunity for collaboration with students and thinking through what that would look like to have a more citywide type partnership with the Lynn Community Health Center. And then for the urgent care, I absolutely think that it's worth making that case to the folks that run the urgent care center about what needs to happen and what we're seeing the need being here. And I think that requires getting really important feedback from residents that are having an issue, whatever the issue is, and organizing so that we can make a strong case and sort of compare our city with peer cities and what other cities have that we're missing. And the healthcare providers have an obligation to take care of the population. They're supposed to be accountable to us. And sometimes that's going to require partnerships with other organizations and agencies that are involved in the oversight of healthcare, including the Massachusetts Office of the Attorney General. And the mayor can play a key role in convening those conversations, organizing them, so that we can make sure that the city's residents have access to the healthcare that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. My second daughter, Ariana, has allergies, egg allergies. And we lived on Cedarbrook Road, which was just around the block from Union Hospital, which actually brought a sense of comfort to us in case she had an allergic reaction. Eggs are in everything, and if it's not in it, it could be made in a factory where it could touch it. So we're very cautious, but before, we felt comfortable knowing, hey, it's just around the block. Now it's not. So that's impacting many families in our city. Another thing that people don't realize is Salem is the closest hospital. In September, October, November, you have 1 million people in Salem. If something drastic happens in this region, you have all those people already in Salem. Those are going to get the priorities. And you know what happens? We're going to have to go to further away hospitals and have to deal with it. Why was that not something that was fought for by our leaders? It's crazy. We're talking about millions of people in October in Salem. Now we're at the back of the line. We need to look at reopening some of these fire stations and staffing them with EMTs, because we have a population of over 20% in the city of Lynn that are over the age of 60 years old that require emergency services on a more frequent basis. The one on Linfield Street, it's a storage, and they do inspectional services for the fire department. That could be a full staffed EMT. We're talking about adding senior housing there. We have a 55-plus community, Apple Blossom, over there. We have the data to see where our aging population is to make sure that we have these emergency services available for them when they need them the most. We need to get back out there, talk to these particular hospitals, and let them know that Lynn has a need, and right now we're at the forefront of breaking through the barriers that didn't allow us to keep them here before. Thank you.
Darren.
Thank you. So Partners owned Union Hospital. They're a for-profit, and they're the only hospital in the country that's for-profit hospital for health care. For several years, through 2 mayors, state delegation, city council, held almost 100 meetings on this, trying to keep that hospital here in Lynn. Community input was put in there, Everybody knows the importance of having a hospital in a city where you have now over 100,000 people. It's unacceptable that the state allowed that hospital to be moved over to Salem. It's an insult to every resident, it's an insult to every councilor, and it was an insult to the mayor. The state should have stepped in. We had no say whether or not they were going to close and move at all. I'm upset about that. I'm upset for you. You deserve better than that. I agree that it's not only during September and October that there are a lot of people that are in Salem that could be utilizing the hospital. Just drive down Highland Ave at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Try to get across the city of Lynn at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or at 6 o'clock in the morning during rush hour. It is completely unacceptable that we don't have a hospital here. And we still work all the time on sitting down with partners and other health agencies to try to get an emergency room brought here to Lynn. It's easy to sit up here and tell you it's going to happen, and if I become mayor, I'm going to do it. There is a process to it, and it takes a while. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. It's short.
Is it for me?
You're going to start, yes, for everybody. Okay. This refers back to the federal monies. How, and you need to give details, are you planning to spend the $180 million of the ARA, American Recovery Act, money?
Great question, and I can let you know that there's guidance on how we can spend that particular money, and there's specific areas that we're able to use that money on. So it's not like we can say we're going to take $100 million of that and build a new school. Can't do that. We can't take money and build new buildings or a new hospital. There are specific things that you can do. So the Treasury Department put out a final report not too long ago as to what we can use this federal fund for. It's 38 pages, and it's pretty articulate. We can't put it into pension. We can't pay certain taxes. It's specific. But there's a lot of things in there that we can do to make the city more equitable, more accessible, more affordable, as long as it relates to COVID and the challenges that we're facing with COVID. And there are substantial challenges that we're facing here in the city due to the inequities. So yes, there's $180 million. It's a substantial amount of money, and we have to spend it over a certain period of time. So we can't just pull it all together and spend it in one shot. So it's going to take fiscal responsibility. It's going to take someone with experience with budgets. It's going to take substantial public input to see where our priorities need to lie. But some of that money definitely can be used just for certain things, like I said, that impacts COVID. And accessibility is one big thing, and that also includes access and infrastructure and whatnot. So as long as it's related to making sure that our community is healthy, that our community is recovering from COVID, and it falls within those that are in the guidelines in that 38-page final memo from the Treasury Department, then we can obviously spend money on that.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Darren?
Thank you. So that's one of the reasons we overrode the mayor's veto, was because we wanted the public to have a say as to how that money's going to be spent. It can be used for infrastructure, and it's kind of strange. The book is about that thick on all the different things that it can be used for, but also what it can't be used for. So when you say infrastructure, if you replace water pipes in the ground, you can do that with the money, but you can't fix the road after you do that. Some of it doesn't make sense. You'd like to know who the people are that are putting together this stuff. It's just unbelievable. But it can't be used to build schools. It can't be used for wages or anything like that. The city just hired a person, and their job is mainly to make sure that when the money is spent and how we spend it and use it, that we're doing it legally. Because we only have 5 years to spend the money that we're getting. And if you take a look at this 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, every single one of them are going to be getting money. It's billions and billions of dollars that are coming right here into Massachusetts alone. So I don't think any one of us can tell you exactly how we can use it yet, because it's as new to us as it is to whoever asked that question. It is an excellent question. But I guarantee you that even if I'm not the mayor because of what we just did on the city council, that there will be complete community involvement as to how that money is spent, wherever it's spent. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared?
Thank you. Yeah, so absolutely we need to follow the federal parameters about what the use of the money is and be careful to not cause any problems for us in doing that. But it's really important that, I'm not going to say today how to spend $180 million, because we should be going through the process to draw in community input, to hear from the community what the priorities are, what the needs are. And, that includes residents, that includes businesses, that includes different cities, departments and workers, and being really deliberate about trying to get broad-based input and ultimately support for the plan in place that we're going to have. We should also be thoughtful about how it's going to fit into the bigger picture of the city's budget, of the other investments that are going to be coming our way with the infrastructure money, and also the city's plans for growth. Because the spending for this money should absolutely address the impact of COVID, the disproportionate impact that's had to help the city fully recover, fairly recover. And it should also really set the table for the kind of growth that we're hoping for. Because that's the other thing that's happening over the next few years that we're all hoping for, is for the city to grow. And we want to make sure that when we do these projects, that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That the projects we're doing interact and ultimately improve the whole city together. And what that requires is really thoughtful planning and understanding, what the needs are, what the other resources we're going to have to meet those needs, and how to build a vision, a cohesive vision that is really community-driven, input-driven, and how to create that vision and then execute it by pulling in different resources. And one of the really important resources that we're going to have, one of the tools that we're going to have in the next couple of years, are these funds. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this one's for Darren. We were always told by the Lynn Police that they do not have the staff or resources to pursue these small-time criminals, such as cracking down on drug sales on the streets of downtown Lynn. What are your plans for addressing the opioid crisis in our city, and what do you think the city can do for our children, family members, and friends who need help with addiction, in addition to the resources that are currently available, such as Healthy Streets and outreach program?
So you got to continue to work on getting more grants to come into the city. Drug use, like alcoholism, it's a disease. They're not criminals, the people that are doing this. So the Sheriff's Department and the Lynn Police are working on it, along with the Fire Department and first responders. So just last year, City Council had someone come in, or 2 years ago, I'm sorry, before COVID started, show us how to use Narcan. And you have to be trained to do that. And I think every citizen in the city should be given the opportunity to do that. Because I'm downtown all the time. And it's not, nothing new to say that when you walk through downtown, you can see what's going on. We have some issues in the city. We have homeless people that live here. We have people that are on drugs and that drink all the time. And, I don't like it. I don't like seeing what I see down there. And we're obligated to try to help those people. We have a lot of nonprofit groups and organizations that are in the city that are supposed to be able to provide services for a lot of these people. But Lynn has become the mecca because no other communities are doing what Lynn does. We have over 350 nonprofit groups and organizations in the city of Lynn that use up a lot of our resources. So we have to really sit down with them and start talking with them and start educating them about our budget and the cost to the city, and see if we can come up with a plan to be able to help people, because drugs, it's touching everybody, no matter what your income level is, no matter what your education is. When you're talking about opioids, it's a terrible, terrible thing that's happening in our country.
Thank you. So, addressing the need for people that are using substances and the opioid issue, I think first we just need to recognize that this is really hard, and it's been exacerbated by the pandemic. People have been cut off by their normal support systems. Opioid overdose deaths are thankfully trending down, but the use of opioids is still prevalent, and people there's been a public health focus, rightly so, in the last year and a half on COVID-19, but this is a public health issue, and we need to address it as a community. One of the things that I think is really important here is coordination among providers of mental health services, because we know that addiction is highly correlated with unmet mental health needs, untreated mental health issues, and coordination is a big part of that, of lining up the right team of folks that have the right expertise to be able to reach people in the moments that they need it, and that they would be open to it. And so that involves the police department. It also involves our mental health service providers. Elliot, folks at Lynn Community Health Center, smaller operations that are part of the team, and that's an important part of the process, and one that we should be continuing to build out, because it takes time to build up those relationships to have that kind of coordination. And one of the issues that I think mental health providers are having is the retention of culturally competent providers, and that's a systemic issue that we need to work on together, is to find people with the right skill set. Another part of this important part is prevention, and the work we're doing in schools to give students the skills they need to make good decisions, to respond when things are happening. And that also includes programs that are being there for students whose families are struggling with addiction as well. So, thank you.
Thank you for the question. At 12 years old, my mom lost custody of me, my brother, and my sister due to her dependency on opiates. And I'm not going to sit here and try to fluff up the answer, because this is a serious issue facing our city. Recently, if you watched the news, the AG settled with two companies, McKinsey & Company and Purdue Pharma, for their involvement with the increase in opiate addiction in the city. McKinsey & Company had a playbook that they sold to opiate companies to get people addicted to it. So to sit here and say that COVID is to blame is not the right answer. The answer are these companies that are profiting off of the people in our city, and it needs to stop. We have to crack down on it on both ends. The money that is coming into the city from the AG, from the settlements, from these two irresponsible companies, need to go to the police so they can also use it, and also to the providers that are around our city. COVID is last year. Our drug issue, our opiate addiction issue in our city is decades. And if you haven't lived here for long enough to see it, ask about it, because it impacts my family, and it impacts hundreds, if not thousands, of other families within our city. So that's what we need to do. We need to address it on both ends. We need to make sure that that money that's coming in from the Attorney General is spent wisely to assure that the families impacted by opiate addiction are addressed, as well as our police. This month is Overdose Awareness Month. There are several families in our city that have had to deal with burying their young children due to overdoses. And it started with the opiate issue. So that's what we need to address. We need to be honest. It's not COVID that started this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this one will start with Jared. If I can open it. Have you helped or hindered the timely creation of more affordable housing in Lynn?
Thank you for the question. I think that the cost of housing is absolutely a top issue that the city faces, and I would say, to answer the question, that I have helped with the creation of affordable housing. You know, the way that the city is working on this currently is that the mayor, working with the Lynn Housing Authority, is working on a housing production plan that is focused on how the city can address the rising cost of housing, skyrocketing rents, the difficulty that aspiring home buyers face to find a home. And I've served on the steering committee of the Housing Plan. And so I feel like absolutely that work has been helpful in the creation of affordable housing that will lead to the creation of affordable housing. It's just a plan. It's just a plan, and we're hoping that it's going to be adopted, but the actual creation of affordable housing will require its implementation. It will definitely be a top priority of mine as mayor. This is an issue I feel like I've done a lot of work on. I've worked as a legal aid lawyer in housing, helping defending tenants and homeowners that are facing unfair evictions, and I see it as one of the top issues facing the city. If we want to give people the chance to participate in the growth that we hope is coming, the people who live here now, then we need to create opportunities for affordable housing, and that means different things depending on where people's incomes are, and it's starting from the premise that half the city is cost burdened by housing. So what that means is that half the city is paying more than 30% of their income for their cost of housing. The federal government determines that to be cost burden. And so the production of affordable housing is going to allow more of those folks to stay in the city. And the way to do that thoughtfully is to do it in a way that encourages growth for all types of housing, including market rate housing, because that ultimately will support the local economy and it will be what's best for the city.
Thank you for the question. My work in this city has been to obviously work on affordability, and that's why it's one of my 4 pillars of my campaign: accessibility, affordability, activities, and public safety. What we have to realize is before us, we have a housing production plan that is geared towards making housing in our city affordable. And my colleague served, he's a school committee member, obviously to provide input, which was extremely important. One thing that we didn't get from my colleague was any information while there was these meetings that were going on. And there is an issue with the council where there's distrust because there was no communication with them either. So we have this plan that we're trying to sell, and you didn't get buy-in from your own colleagues. I had to put forward a resolution on the school committee to show support for this particular housing production plan because I knew it was important and I read into it. So it's important to communicate with people and to make sure that we understand that affordability is not just being on Section 8 or vouchers, it's the ability to live where you've always lived. And I've done programs throughout the city every year where I allow for, just last year, it was 25 people to go through the real estate course, the 40-hour course, for free. So they can earn additional income to better their lives. There are steps that we can do, all of us. We can work with Lynn Housing Authority to make sure that they're expanding particular programs for the down payment assistance. We can do a lot of different things. This is the second housing production plan that we've had in the past 8 years. Very similar recommendations. But we keep on paying for these plans and we don't do anything with it. It's about time that we do something about it. And as mayor, that's what I'll do. I'll continue to focus on affordability. Thank you.
Affordable housing is a national issue. It's not just a problem here in Lynn. But we're being asked to fix this area, when I mean area, region, problem of affordable housing. The reason why there's such a need for affordable housing in Lynn, whereas 10 years ago, I mean, there's always been a need for affordable housing everywhere, but because so many other communities are building up their cities and their towns, and they're pushing everybody towards Lynn because Lynn is the only place that they can afford to live. The average income in the city of Lynn for a family of four is $45,000 a year. In order to have a home, you have to make, on average, $60,000 a year. There are some things in the housing production plan that I agree with, and there are a lot of things in there that I don't. Some of them are illegal. And even some of the people that were partaking in putting that plan together have acknowledged that. We are obligated to help people who go to work every single day, whether it's a single-parent household or a two-parent household, and they aren't making enough money because of their jobs to survive. And we do. We have to come up with some kind of a plan to do that. We talk about bringing development into the city, and the reason we want to bring what they call market rate into the city is to support our businesses. The housing plan, what it'll do is it'll create possibly some affordable housing, but I don't think you'll see any new development come into the city because of the restrictions that will be put on developers. But it's just going to bring more people into the city and put a burden on our school system.
Thank you.
Okay, for the next questions, you start, Satterwhite, Mr. Satterwhite.
Mike.
With all the recent building that has been done in the city and more planned, what are your plans to address the burden of traffic congestion and also fixing our horrific road conditions?
Great question, and I drive these same roads, so I feel the pain. We do have a lot of building going on, and just maybe, I believe it was maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, we got our planners in our city. So we have 13.5 square miles for the city of Lynn, and for a long period of time, we did not have a planning department. So now we do. So when we build these buildings and whatnot, we have some guidance, some insight as to how it's going to impact the residents. But on top of that, we need to make sure that before anything is done within our city, that our community has input in the beginning. Because we're building on top of things that are already there. We're talking about ZBA meetings where someone's looking for variance to have 23 parking spots, a variance for 23 parking spots because they're just not there. We're talking about infrastructure, which is important, and we're going to have a lot of money coming in, but it's only specific roads that are going to be used for the state funding that's coming in, and it's the dangerous roads. But we can also obviously seek additional funds to address the other roads that we have. People make jokes about it online, on social media, about how you can drive down the street and need new tires within a couple seconds after driving down the street. It's crazy. It's nuts. But it's not like that around the entire city. I'll tell you that. I live in Ward 1. If I see a pothole, it's going to be filled by the time I get home. You don't get that same thing around the city. So when I say every ward, every resident, every business, you need a mayor doing that to make sure that it's spread out equitably around the city. It's important. We all pay taxes, right? We all want a return on our investment. Our investment as our tax money. So let's start seeing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cyr.
So, population of the city keeps increasing every year. And if you go into, it's also, I guess you could say, outside of downtown, in the suburban part of the city, no matter what ward you go into. And you see a lot of single-family homes where you have as many as 10 or 15 people living in those homes. You see a lot of multifamily homes where you could have as many in a three-family home as many as 60 people living in those apartments, in those buildings. And how do I know that? When we were doing the food distribution during the pandemic, and we were delivering food to people's homes, ISD is aware of it, the CFO is aware of it, everybody's aware of it. And what's happening is with all these people, they all have cars. They all need to get to work. So you could drive down a street in Lynn that you drove down 10 or 15 years ago. You might have seen 2 or 3 cars parked along that street. Now you can see 50 or 60. You can't even find a parking spot. As a ward councilor, you can ask any other ward councilor, the biggest complaints that we all get is about parking. The second is about our roads. Right now, the city of Lynn, because we didn't go chase after the grants that we could go after to fix our roads, we've got over $50 million that are going to be coming into Lynn to take care of 3 major roads in the city of Lynn. That money has already been put down for us, for Lynn. Essex Street, Weston Ave, and I believe Chatham Street are going to be the 3 streets that are being taken care of. Easton Ave, right now, is being completed. We get $90 million. It's a new question.
Go ahead. You can finish, Darren.
Thank you. We get roughly about $1.9 million a year to fix our roads. It's nowhere near enough money. That money is Chapter 90 money that comes into the city every year. We keep asking our state delegation, and they try. They wind up coming up once in a while with some extra money. But when you have to spread it out amongst our city, 13.5 miles doesn't sound like a lot. We have thousands of streets, thousands of courts that are in really bad need of repair. And we're trying to put that money across equally throughout the entire city. So that it's an issue that we're working on, and we're going to try to take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren.
So, yeah, so the first thing about addressing traffic is through the planning process. And one of the issues we're having as a city is that we are getting an increase in development, an increase in projects. And for a long time, we were sort of starved for projects. And we need to adapt to meet these current circumstances when we're having development. And what that means is a more robust planning process. And it's probably going to mean more asks of developers earlier in the process. And those asks are going to be about the impact of the development, helping us think through how this project is going to interact with the neighborhood, how to make sure that we hit that goal of the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. So we asked the developer to look into some things: the impact on parking, the impact on traffic, the impact on the environment. And this is par for the course in other cities, that the developer is bringing to the table what the impact is going to be on the community. And part of that is traffic, and that's a part of how we address the traffic impact that the development that we're hoping for is going to have on the city. Another way of addressing traffic in the city is improved public transportation. If people are more comfortable taking buses, taking trains, maybe taking a ferry, then you're going to have fewer cars on the road, and that should be part of the case that we're making for what the future of the city should look like in improving public transportation. The roads, the condition of the roads absolutely needs to be addressed. If you drive around the city, it's readily apparent that there is just deferred maintenance in the quality of our streets. And we're going to have the opportunity to make more of those investments with the infrastructure money that's coming. And so, being really transparent about what that process is, I think when we talk about transparency, one of the ways that I think that we could improve that is being really transparent about how we prioritize the roads and streets that are served, and having that information more easily accessible, so that if somebody feels like their road hasn't been paved in a while, that's just an easier information to go out and access. But it's a huge priority. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hard to believe we're on question number 10. We're going to start off with our city council president. If elected, what steps would you put our city on a firmer financial footing? What steps would you put our city on a firmer financial footing? That's the question, so I'm not quite sure of how I could switch
So-
that up.
I believe that we've been working on that for
Yeah.
the last 4 years, along with the mayor, the city council, and the CFO. Any expenditures that are spent, we need to get approval from the state auditor, Mr. Cronin. We'd work probably a lot more closely with him if I'm elected mayor than this mayor has been doing. We have $28 million that are in the reserve account. It's because we've been holding the mayor's feet to the fire. Every time there's an expenditure, we go over it with a fine-tooth comb. We sit there and we look at it and we see if there's a need. There's been a few times where we haven't agreed with them and we haven't voted for it. So we are working towards bringing our city into a better financial position than we have been in the past. One of the ways of doing that is by bringing more jobs into the city, more businesses, by bringing more development into the city, help with our bringing our tax base to a better level that supports the infrastructure, that supports building new schools, creating better education, better schools is the only way we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared?
Definitely. So we've made a lot of progress financially compared to where we were 4 years ago. And so, one step is to continue the fiscal discipline and making sure that we're spending within our means and making progress towards our goals to address the debt that we have. Another important part of that in the fiscal discipline is being really on top of the school budget, the interaction between the school budget and the city budget. The school budget, as Councilor Cyr mentioned, is a huge part of the city's budget. And one of the issues that we got in several years ago was the trouble that we had meeting net school spending. And that sort of worsened the situation we were in, and it's something that we really want to be staying on top of. In addition, one of the big expenditures that we have coming up, as we've been talking about, is the plans for construction of new schools. So there's going to be a lot of interaction between the education budget, the school's budget, and the city's budget that we need to stay on top of. In the long run, the best thing we can do to improve our city's fiscal situation is to bring in positive commercial growth. And that the mayor can play a huge role in that, in working to recruit industries and setting the table for the kind of growth that we want with infrastructure investments, with education investments. We live 10 miles from the life sciences capital of the world. And those companies are eating up lab space in Kendall Square, they filled up the seaport, they're going to Watertown, they're going to Waltham, and we should be making a play for that industry. We have a great legacy of making things in the city of Lynn, and there's parts of that in the biotechnology field. And then, I also am a very strong supporter of the community campaign to encourage GE to invest in Lynn, and to try to think about how their headquarters in Boston should be playing out and their attention to the plant here. So lots of options there. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Thank you. I've lived here, I'm 37 years old, and I can tell you the first thing we need to do is stop doing business as usual, because that's gotten us into a lot of trouble. And I know that Mr. Cyr has said, the mayor's been the mayor for 4 years, okay? So if we add up, we had fiscal issues well before then. So we need to do, I know the mayor ran on it, to do a forensic audit as to see where our money's going. It's vital to have that data and information. So we're making sure that we're not continuing in some sort of cycle. We need to break the cycles, break down the barriers. And Mr. Cyr referenced Cronin, but his job here was to be a fiscal responsibility officer over the money, because of the money we borrowed, the $14 million. And so if you look at it, yeah, we've made some progress, but it wasn't progress without guidance. We have someone telling us what the best practices are, how things should be done because everyone else does it that way. We always had the Lynn way, not the Lynn way, the Lynn way, and it's not always the best way. It's gotten us into a lot of short-term crises. 37 years, nothing's changed. 37 years. I need the city to change for my kids. My family lives here. It's not just me. My remaining grandmother still lives here. My aunts, uncles, we all live here. This is personal. So when we're talking about making sure that our budget is fiscally responsible, yes, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it every single day. If you're asking for money, I want to make sure that it's going towards something that impacts the community. I say it often. We are the taxpayers. We need a return on our investment. It's only fair. And I'll make sure that happens. I have the background and experience to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this next question, we'll start with Jared. Many years ago, when asked why the city keeps selling off so much of our city properties, we were told because the city doesn't want to be a landlord. When in fact, the city is playing landlord by collecting property taxes, excise taxes, trash fees, etc. Why is the city selling off so much of our own city properties? Don't you feel it's a temporary, quick fix solution instead of long-term? What happens when there's nothing left to sell?
Great question. So, we can't go back in time to transactions that have already taken place, but we can absolutely pay careful attention to the use of public property and make sure that we're getting the most for each opportunity. It is really a case-by-case basis on particular properties, what the best is going to be for the city. And what that requires is getting the team together and thinking through from, various department heads and departments and workers and community members about what role that property is playing. There will certainly be circumstances when the best thing for the city is to sell the property, and those are conversations that we should have as a city about what do we want the community benefit to be. Because if we're selling public property, there should be a public benefit. And that in those types of conversations, we can have some thinking about what the community is that is going to be met by the public benefit. So that for those kinds of processes, there's a case-by-case basis. And the actual steps, the disposal of public property is highly regulated by statute in terms of the steps that need to be taken and the conditions that can be attached and so on and so forth. But it's always an opportunity for the city to think about what the ultimate end result is going to be. And so, sometimes those properties, the public properties, is really the only opportunity that the city has to create the kind of deeply affordable housing that the city needs. Because it's really hard for private developers to make the math work on projects for housing units for folks with lower income, and some of the public properties can be helpful there.
Thank you. Michael?
Thank you. So we know as a city we're land poor. There's not much left to build. And so you don't have to go back in time when you lived through it. And I've lived through it. So one of the things that was an issue with the Pickering, the new Pickering that we had over there with the Parkland Ave location, and just the thought of having to build a new Pickering was, you know what they did? They went around, they brought people to Marshall to see what it was, and they came back to Pickering, and they brought people to the building of Pickering, and they were talking about the things that we were missing. You know, one of the things they talked about that we were missing at Pickering was a library. And everyone lived through the fact that not long ago we had a library on Canoma Street. So to say, hey, we need a new middle school because we need a library, is crazy. It's like people are like, what are you talking about? We used to have one. So we see what it's done to the city, and it's definitely going to hinder progress. We say we need new schools, yet we can't. We see new charter schools in our old school buildings. We see the issues that we're having is the disconnect with the public. We have to be open, transparent, and have input before we start doing what we're doing. Celebrate Literacy Day is a big day, and we talk about why literacy is so important, but we have one library. Loretta Cuff O'Donnell wrote an article endorsing me, but she had talked about the fact that we have more funeral homes in our city than firehouses, active firehouses. We have more funeral homes in our city than hospitals. We have more funeral homes in our city than senior center. It's crazy. We keep on selling off our public land, our land, and we're doing so in an irresponsible way. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the libraries were sold off over 25 years ago, before I even got on the council. I'm not in favor of selling off city-owned property unless the community can benefit from that. It's very rare that we do sell off a large enough parcel of land that's buildable land. What usually winds up happening is a developer will come in or a business owner and want to buy a small piece of land that they've already, in most cases, have a right-of-way to that land. Talking 4,000 or 5,000 square foot pieces. An example is up on Wyoma Square right now. There's a business up there that is trying to buy a piece of land. So what we do as the city, through Ways and Means, through our Public Properties Committee, is we put out a bid to have someone go out and take a look at it, to find out what the actual worth is of that property. And we can't ask a price for that property is to give it away. We don't do that in the city of Lynn. There is a piece of land right now that's the school department owns. It's the old Marshall Middle School. We have sent an RFP out. And how does that service the community? Is by building senior housing there. The cost to the city to tear the building down would be a $9 million cost. We don't have the money to do that. So that's why we're looking to sell it off. It doesn't make sense because of the neighborhood or the area that it's located in to build another school or to use it for a school. And that's the unfortunate part about, we are land poor here in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're on to question 12. I have a plan for that land. So question 12, we're going to start with Michael. How will you use the power of your office to help people stay in their homes and people who are on lower incomes and to afford to live in the city of Lynn?
Thank you. That's a great question. And again, my platform is accessibility, affordability, activities, in public safety, because those are 4 key things that impact our everyday life, and that should be the focus of the city. So affordability is making sure that we have programs in place that can help certain types of groups. We have different needs for different groups. So about 20% of our population are seniors, and the property taxes are outrageous. So even if you don't have a mortgage and you're just living in your house with just the insurance and the property taxes, it's unaffordable if you're living on a $2,000 or $2,500 Social Security check. So one of the things that other states do is they allow for you to defer your property taxes until you are deceased. And then what happens is the estate will pay it when that particular event takes place. But it relieves the burden on that particular person and the stress, and allows them to live in the house that they've lived in for a long period of time. When we're talking about those that are between the ages of 30 and 59, I would say that making sure that we have a robust adult education program so we can make sure that our residents are learning middle skilled careers, which are vital. Every year there's about 400,000 jobs that are middle skilled, and they pay above $75,000 a year. Right now there are 25,000 jobs in the city of Lynn. Of those, about 13,000 of them pay under $3,333 a month. And you can't afford to live here. We need to really address affordability in our city, and we can do that by the different programs that I've suggested, which is expanding certain programs that Lynn Housing Authority has and working with private industry. So we can expand the down payment assistance with Lynn Housing Authority and other areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Darren?
Thank you. As I said earlier, affordable housing is a national problem. The federal government has to come up with more programs to assist cities and towns, as does the state. We can't fix it alone here in the city of Lynn. We're just not going to be able to do that. I use this term, we have to break the cycle of poverty. And if you take a look at all the surrounding communities that are around us, and I said earlier that people move to Lynn because it's the only community that they can afford to live in, because we're a city of services. That's why our taxes keep going up every year. I said earlier that the revenue that comes in from taxes, whether it be property or commercial or combined, is around $160 million a year. Our budget is over 410. Almost 2/3 of it goes to the school department. Our buildings are over 100 years old. We have to come up with a plan to fix those. So even if the MSBA allows us to build a school every 5 years, that burden can come back on the taxpayers if we're going to be doing that. So there are programs that are being started across the country that if you're a senior and you get to be 68 or 69 and you lived in your community, your city for a certain period of time, you don't have to pay taxes. There are other programs, as Michael said, that you wind up not paying taxes at all until the property is sold, either because of death or whatever it may be. So what we have to do is, it's a national issue, but get our state legislators working with us in the State House and get our surrounding communities, the surrounding towns, Linfield, Swampscott, all of them on board working with us, because they don't have affordable housing either.
Thank you, Darren. Jared?
Thank you. Yeah, so helping Lynn residents stay in their home, helping give the opportunities for lower-income residents to have housing. You know, this was one of the central questions of the Housing Lynn plan over the last year and a half. And, you know, we can start with the recommendations and thinking that have been delivered through that plan. They ran a robust planning process, several community forums, hundreds of comments submitted, publicly shared by myself, by the Lynn Public Schools who put out the information whenever there was a community forum, and people reached out. People know that the cost of housing is a huge issue in the city, and they're experiencing it, and they're worried about their future and about being displaced from the city that the current residents built. The opportunity that's here now is because of the people that live here that created it. And the idea that the growth that we've been hoping for is going to be ultimately what pushes them out is so frustrating. And the most frustrating part of it is that it's avoidable for a lot of folks if we act now. And there's urgency to it. There's absolutely urgency to it, because once people are forced out, they're not going to be able to find their way back. We've seen this happen in other communities. And we're saying now that there's more that the city can be doing to give folks that opportunity. So, you know, keeping folks in their home, there's a lot that we can be doing to support tenants, to let them know about resources, to be able to make their tenancies work. The developing opportunities for affordable housing is another conversation that we've had in terms of housing production. That's part of it too. And then certainly, in the long run, connecting folks with higher paid jobs is always going to be helpful. And that is absolutely part of the charge of the Lynn Public Schools and building pathways for students to college and jobs. It's giving current residents pathways to jobs and looking at industries that are hiring in information technology and healthcare, and thinking about how those programs can connect. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared.
This next question, we'll start with Mr. Cyr. There has been much controversy for years now surrounding the old Thurgood Marshall Middle School and what to do with it, from tearing it down to selling it off. What are your feelings about the plans currently being discussed, and would you be open to the city keeping ownership and the idea that it could be used as a combination of a senior center, daycare, preschool, and cooling station? So it serves more people of Lynn.
So, as the ward counselor, who's had more than several meetings with the neighbors and everybody that lives in that area, what they want to see there is senior housing. And the senior housing that's being proposed, that there will be a senior center there. We have over 6,000 seniors that are looking for affordable housing in Lynn. We have seniors that are sleeping on their sons' or daughters' couches. We have seniors that are living in their cars in the city of Lynn that need help. Kings Beach Towers, which is on Eastern Ave, has a waiting list of over 5 years to get in there. All the senior buildings in the city do. So when we talk about coming up with a program for affordable housing, one way is by doing that is through seniors. Because there are a lot of seniors that can't afford their houses because of taxes, they can't maintain them. There's a house down on Goldfish Pond that's ready to fall over. It's an elderly woman who's lived there for years. And she can't afford to take care of it, and she can't afford to pay the taxes on it. So I'd like to come up with a program that we can help her so that she could get into an affordable unit, and that we could turn that house over to someone that's looking to fill the American dream. One of those families that are only making $45,000 a year. We fall into the formula of Boston when it comes to affordable housing. In order for a person to afford to be able to go into an affordable unit, they have to make $119,000 a year. And they want to use the AMI, the area medium income. So if the rent, and I just use this as an example, is $2,000 a month, they want to pay $1,800 for the unit. That's not fair to people who live in Lynn.
Thank
Because
you.
they don't make $119,000 a year.
All right. Thank you.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. What are your feelings about the plans currently being discussed? And would you be open to the city keeping ownership and the idea that it could be used as a combination of a senior center, daycare, preschool, and cooling station? So it serves more people of Lynn.
Thank you. So, the RFP is pretty far along in that process, and I think there absolutely is a need for senior housing. And I do think that it's important when you are developing sort of populations of senior housing that are outside the center of the city, that there's a way to access resources. So I think having some kind of satellite senior center or senior services where there are congregations of seniors in a development makes a lot of sense. And so, I think that part of the conversation there, and still early stages. I think what's important to remember is that when we're dealing with public land, particularly these large projects, that the city's in the driver's seat about what the vision is, and it only helps the process to clearly articulate the need that we want developers to fill, because we'll get better proposals. Developers are better able to understand what it is we're looking for in the process, and so they can cost it out and put forward what the city is looking for. And so, when we have these opportunities, we have the one at Marshall, we might have others in the downtown. That's really important, is to be really clear about what we think the need is and what we think the community benefits are going to be. So, there's absolutely the need for senior housing there. And, one of the things that we've been talking about, in the last forum with Mass Senior Action is that as we create these opportunities for senior housing, how are we coordinating around the city to make sure that seniors have access to services, they have access to healthy food, they have access to the health care they need, they have the ability to get around the city through transportation. And that's going to be a big conversation that we'll need to have around the Marshall side as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So we had one meeting with City Hall regarding the old Thornwood Marshall School, and I don't believe that it went so well. And I think that most of my colleagues feel the same way. So I did get the RFPs that were sent out and returned with regards to the buildings, and we're talking about affordable senior housing. But if you look further into it as to the makeup of the AMI that they're looking to put into that, it's 60 and 30. So they're saying they need to diversify the seniors that are living there so they can make it worthwhile. And it's going to exclude a lot of the seniors that live in our city. So to say that it's going to be senior housing for those that need it, that want to move and take it over, which would be an interesting program, I would tell you that I'm not in favor of that. I don't believe that a senior center at the old Thurgood Marshall would work because it's not centralized enough for the seniors that currently live here without a means of transportation. If we fix that transportation issue, it could be. I know that Mr. Cyr said he had 7 meetings, which is great, and that's awesome. But if we're talking about a possible senior center at that location, it's important to speak to seniors. I said that about the RFP for the senior center. How many of them did a questionnaire? How many of them were included in the RFP? We're talking about people like it's a commodity, but they're people. They can speak. They can talk about what their needs are and where they want to be. So we can't keep on selling off our property. I've said it a million times. And we did talk about a possible joint senior and daycare for that particular location, and I would still be open to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, we're going to start this question with Jared. What, in your opinion, is Lynn's most pressing problem, and what is your plan to address it?
Great, thank you. So I think, we talked about in the very first question of our priority, and I talked about the need to invest in infrastructure, and I think the infrastructure is a problem, absolutely will be a top priority. We talked about the conditions of the roads and sidewalks in the city, the need to update city buildings and equipment. So, that's absolutely a pressing problem. It's one that has been deferred for a very long time to upgrade the infrastructure, to invest in the infrastructure. And it's one we're going to have a real opportunity to address with the stimulus funds and the infrastructure money that we're hoping to take advantage of. And that, infrastructure includes the physical state of the schools, the need for buildings, which is absolutely a pressing problem. Both because the facilities that we have are inadequate, they're just not acceptable learning conditions for a lot of the classrooms, and because of the overcrowding issue. And I think the cost of housing really is a pressing problem, and one that we need to come together to address now, because people are already feeling that pinch, feeling like they need to move, and people are being displaced, and that it's one that we need to sort of recognize that yes, this is a national problem, this is a state problem, but there's things that we can be doing right here, and that's what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about what can we do right here in Lynn together to address these problems. And so there are steps that we can take to address the rising cost of housing. There are steps that we can be taking to upgrade our city's infrastructure and to be building new schools, because those are really pressing problems. And sort of running through all this, and a reason why we're sitting here and most of the room has masks on is the obvious pressing problem of COVID-19. And it's an ongoing public health issue, and we need to continue to address it.
Thank you, Jared. Michael?
Thank you. I see the most pressing problem within our city is accessibility and access. We need roads, of course, to get from point A to point B. We need a better paying jobs. And that all falls into the accessibility aspect of what my platform is, access. We're talking about seniors being able to walk down a street that is leveled and not falling over. We're talking about wheelchairs being able to go up and down the sidewalk. That's very important. We're talking about access to healthcare. We're talking about access to employment. We're talking about access to education. We're talking about access to all of the things that we need to have access to as a community. And that's going to include making sure that we are taking the input of our community and we're actually speaking back to that community. I think for far too long, we feel as though even our mayor is untouchable, or our mayor is not, there's no access to that particular person. And it gets to a point where we start feeling like it's not our government for the people, by the people. So accessibility is vital in this city, and we need to work on it on day one. Like Jared said, COVID, that has to do with accessibility and access to vaccination and treatment. That's extremely important. Employment, we need to have adult education programs that start training people with the middle skilled careers that are great. My wife graduated from Lynn Tech with a CNA. She went right into Salem State, got her RN, and now she's an MP. We have programs here that we can expand for adults to enjoy as well. It's possible. We can recruit different companies to come here. We have an amazing multicultural population. People that speak both English and Spanish. We have people that speak Russian. We have people that speak all different languages. That is a benefit for the city, and that's how we need to sell it to the rest of the world.
Thank you, Michael. Darren?
Thank you. So, schools and infrastructure and schools. Because of what the cost is going to be and what the future holds for us, if we don't start addressing schools, you're talking about $600 million in our schools alone. The way it's set up right now, we're talking about $500 million in infrastructure, which is roads, sidewalks, parks. So we really got to sit down and we've got to really take a look at it. And we got to understand what the process is. It's easy for us to sit up here and tell you what we're going to do. Being on the city council and seeing the frustration over years from other city councilors, that we want the same things that all of you want. We want better jobs, better streets, safer streets, better schools, better education for our students. So I really believe the way to do it is by building new schools and fixing the ones that we have. Doesn't make sense going back to Marshall to use that as a school or anything else because we don't have the money to put into it to do it. That's why we've put the RFP out. When we talk about net school spending for our schools, we can't use money, and it comes out of the city side every time a roof goes. Our windows need to be replaced. That's where the bonds are. Most of the bonds that we have are because of our schools, because of the cost of education. So that's why I'm saying, well, we got to really take a look at how are we going to build new schools. And I'm not talking every 5 to 10 years because we're going to be building them for 100 years. By the time we get these schools fixed, we're going to be all the others that got to be fixed.
Thank you, Darren. This next question is going to be the last question before the three of you get an opportunity to ask your questions. So this is this is the next to last question. I'm so sorry. Before the last question, then your questions. So.
Okay, and we are starting with Michael. What unique ideas do you have that have not been addressed previously that would benefit all residents of Lynn?
Great question. So we're talking about the four core things on my platform: accessibility, affordability, activities, and public safety. I'll go with just one on affordability. So I'm a practicing attorney. I'm an actual litigator, and I have clients throughout the country. And the law has been very good for me. One of the things that I do is I specialize in working with human resource departments on relocation agreements. So when you have a population that don't fit the criteria that you're looking for to fill a position, what happens is they look outside of that area. And then once they get that person, a part of the benefit is they bring them here to live, and they'll pay that cost. So I've actually spoke to some private industries to see if they would do something very similar to a relocation agreement, where they will match whatever the down payment assistance is from Lynn Housing Authority to get them into home ownership. So once you have home ownership, you have that number that the principal and interest, which is great. The only things that are variable are your insurance and your taxes. So we need to make sure that we have a leader in our city that understands that every time your property taxes go up, it actually hits your pocket. It's an impact. So this entity, the businesses that I'm speaking to, actually like that, because one thing, it adds stability to the company. So when that employee gets that benefit from the company, they are required to stay employed for a certain period of time, or they have to pay it back. So retraining is a substantial cost on businesses. I'm a small business owner. So I can tell you that training an individual is a substantial cost. So companies will see that. In addition to that, there could be other benefits to get more private companies to be interested in it. Because they want their employees to live here, they want their employees to work here, they want their employees to have affordable housing. So that's one unique idea that I have that I want to put out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, for the last 5.5 years as council president, I've been meeting with and building relationships with property owners in the downtown area, along the Linway. I've been meeting with developers, and I've begun meeting with different labor unions. And one of the things that I want to do is bring all of them into a room and get them all to sit down and see what the benefits that they all can get. And already alone, there's one union that we're talking to that wants to sit down with developers and sees what the potential is for them. Our future industry is our development here in the city. The hard thing about bringing in businesses, and the reason why so many businesses have left Lynn, is because it takes so long to get out to your mass highways. 93, 95, 495, Route 1. I live off Eastern Ave. In the morning on my way to work, it takes me over a half hour to get out of the city. Amazon is looking to come here to Lynn because it takes so long for them to get into the city. It's the same as reverse. And they would use Lynn as their staging area for the North Shore. But I see other potential. I see other ways for us to bring businesses here into the city. And I've been working on those relationships for the past 5.5 years. Our mayor has not been. I've been working with Jim Cardell from EDIC. I've been working with real estate developers about getting them to bring businesses into the city. There were times where I was meeting with 3 or 4 different developers and property owners. When I say our future industry is the Linway of the downtown, we're talking about billions, if not trillions, of dollars worth of development and billions of dollars worth of jobs, high-paying jobs.
Thank you. So one area that I'd like to discuss and have some unique ideas that we haven't talked about as much tonight would be in the area of supporting small local businesses and using small businesses as a way to make sure that the growth that we have in Lynn is inclusive. So one thing that we can work on there is the availability of financing. It's really difficult to get a loan for a small business. It's hard to have the credit history that you would need for a bank loan. Other cities have created pooled loans where local banks create a lending pool to be able to share that kind of risk for small businesses, and that's an important strategy for supporting small businesses in Lynn. Another step that we can take is including small businesses early and often in planning conversations. Because we do have a wonderful opportunity on the waterfront that we need to make the most of, and a wonderful opportunity in the downtown. We also need to make sure that the neighborhoods are included in this growth that we want to have happen. And that means local businesses, which are such key stakeholders for our neighborhoods. Another area there that I think is interesting and unique is we have a diverse community in Lynn. It's something we're really proud of. We have a lot of people with different types of heritage, including food. And supporting food businesses, local food businesses, restaurants in Lynn, I think would be a great way to support small businesses, make sure that growth is inclusive. And something other cities have done is a shared commercial kitchen, a test kitchen where people can work on their concept of starting a restaurant, because it's really hard to start a restaurant if you've never done that before. And one of the issues is having access to a commercial kitchen. And so if you have a shared commercial kitchen, it can kind of be like an incubator for these new and diverse businesses. Another type of small business that I think we could work more with are multi-service businesses. You see them all over the community, and they have great relationships with exactly the community that we're hoping to reach. And so developing relationships with multi-service businesses would also be helpful. Thank you.
This next question, I'm going to kind of change some of the words. So Massachusetts, Kings Beach, which we all know, the state, the Department of, it runs the public beaches here in Lynn, has been reported to be the most polluted beach in the entire state, and that the beach tested 75% of the time for unsafe for swimming. What is the city's plan to clean this beach? But I would ask you, what is the city's plan, and as mayor, what will you do to advocate your state representatives to make sure the beach receives resources it's need to be cleaned ASAP? Darren's first, I'm sorry.
All right, thank you. So there are two communities that are causing the problem, Swampscott being one. Their drainage and storage system is so old, they're in the process of trying to fix that right now. The other one is that what's happening now is instead of every 10 years or every 100 years, we're getting storms 3 or 4 times a year. And this past summer, we've gotten probably about 15 to 30 rainstorms. We've had over 20 inches of rain since June till now. So our system is not capable of handling that much water that's coming into it. We've had numerous meetings with our state delegation, with Kings Beach committee, with the town of Swampscott, trying to come up with a plan or a way to fix it. And one of the biggest issues, to be honest with you, is that everybody disagrees on how to do it. The Army Corps of Engineers has suggested 2 different ways. One doesn't seem to make sense to some people, because what it is to take the pipe and bring it 4 or 5 miles out into the ocean, so that by the time that gets out there, it disperses out there. Swampscott is afraid that it would blow back on them. The other way of doing it is with chlorine. And that's what they use in our water treatment plant right now. And you can put such a small dosage in there, by the time that it gets out to the end of the outflow pipe, that it's already dispersed. But it's going to kill all the bacteria that's already in there. There's no raw storage from people who are illegally hooked up to it that are going into that system. How do I know all of this? From dozens of meetings that we've had over the last 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Jared?
Thank you. Yeah, so we absolutely need strong advocacy from City Hall to make progress on this issue. And that doesn't mean that City Hall is in a position to solve this problem by itself. It's absolutely going to require really strong collaboration between the city government, Lynn Water and Sewer, the town of Swampscott, state and federal partners, the advocates who are highlighting the issue and can connect us with thinking and ideas from other communities. Because it's just unacceptable that beaches up and down the Massachusetts Bay have been cleaned. It's not, those beaches had issues too. and they were cleaned. And it was a huge success story that the Massachusetts Bay was cleaned up and the urban beaches are safe to swim up and down the coast, except for Kings Beach, except for our beach in Lynn. And the city of Lynn is tired of being overlooked. And the mayor can absolutely provide leadership in demanding that this be resolved. You know, and this is something that I've spoken up about. I had an op-ed in the Daily Item earlier this week about the importance of the issue, and that, you know, that kind of advocacy is an important part of what the mayor can offer here, bringing people to the table, providing the urgency, because you know, because of all the different stakeholders involved, it's not something that the mayor can just decide needs to be fixed. It requires collaboration. So that's, you know, advocacy is part of that. Relationship is building is part of that. Bringing people to the table and identifying solutions. You know, the good news is that for the infrastructure solutions, like we've been talking about tonight, we will have some opportunities to make infrastructure improvements. And that's part of what's going to be required in order for us to be able to address this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Michael?
37 years I've swum in that beach. And I remember being a kid and playing with that water and not realizing that it had bacteria in it. So you know, it's personal. That's what, you know, I've lived it. I've been in there. It's sad. It really is that we're at this particular juncture. And I spoke just recently to several homeowners right on the beach, and they were upset about it because they're paying $13,000 and $11,000 in property taxes for beachfront property that they can't swim in. So how is that equitable for them? And I spoke to the counselors that were running in those wards to let them know what I was hearing, because it was important for them to know. So it's vital for us to address the situation. For the Student Opportunity Act, the teachers went right in front of Charlie Baker's house in Swampscott, and they advocated for it. We can do the same. We should be having meetings on that at Red Rock or on the beach with the residents and addressing it. We should be talking to news outlets. It's important. Again, why is it Lynn? Why are we always the last? We put so much out there, and we're always the last. So let's talk about it. Let's bring awareness. That right there is what gets people's attention. It gets their attention. So we need to advocate. We need to talk about it. We need to have meetings. We need to talk to news outlets. We need to continue to have pressure on DCR and other state entities for them to correct this issue, because it's not right. It's not right. It's not fair. And again, we do enough in this city that the state should start realizing that Lynn is on the map. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
For this next question, we'll start with Jared. According to the 2020 census results, the population of Lynn has increased by more than 10,000 people since 2010. There are also several thousand new residential units in various stages of planning and construction. However, the total number of firefighters and police officers has been reduced over the years. There are also 3 active fire stations that are over 100 years old, and others have been closed. How do you plan to increase and improve public safety in terms of staffing and infrastructure?
Thank you. So, you know, one of the strategies for addressing this, when you're talking about the plan developments, is what we were talking about earlier in terms of the asks that we're making of developers when we're going through the planning process and thinking about the demands that new developments place on our services, and that includes our public safety services. And so we can include that sort of that thinking in the planning for the future budgets, because we absolutely need to be investing in public safety, the infrastructure, the buildings and equipment that we talked about. We've been talking about that all night, about how that forms a key part of the infrastructure and the infrastructure that we're going to have the opportunity to invest in with the money that's coming our way. You know, and we should remember that when we're planning for these developments, that needs to include public safety. Those conversations about what projects are going to come, what the future of the city is going to look like, it needs to improve public safety. Because one of the best things that a city government can do to set the table for positive growth, to attract positive growth, is to get the basics right. And public safety is absolutely one of those really important basics that we all depend on and expect from local government is public safety. And so, including them in the conversations, I think, one of the things that's apparent in terms of the opportunity that we have for the future of the city is that we need a broader master plan for the city, a comprehensive plan. And that is going to be the product of a lot of community input, talking to various stakeholders, and absolutely public safety and the infrastructure needs that we're talking about with public safety will be a part of that plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Great question, and I said it earlier in that letter from Loretta. She talked about there being more funeral homes than firehouses, more funeral homes than, these basic things that we need. So when I hear someone say that Caldwell got a TIF and there was no public benefit in it, and it was for $2.5 million, that drives me nuts, because guess what? That $2.5 million means something to us, okay? So we're not able to hire new firefighters. We're not able to hire new police officers. We're not able to do things for public safety because that $2.5 million is not realized by our city. It's not a public benefit when we do stuff like that. So when people say, oh, they got a tax break, no. It impacted us in those areas, because guess what? When there's a fire, our fire department has to go there. And now when there's a fire across the city and all the fire trucks are there because we don't have the infrastructure that our emergency services need, it's gonna be issues, just like with the hospital, with being in Salem and we're in Lynn. It's crazy. We need investment. Any new development in our city has to have a public benefit and also has to have the ability for funds to go towards our public safeties. It's vital. We're praising this new ambulance that we got for the fire department. Well, we needed it 20 years ago. Like, really, now we're patting ourselves on the back? Come on. There are things that we need to do, and we need to look at the long term of things. We can't keep on going into these short-term crises and then having to sell off everything in order to get out of it, or having to go to the state to ask for money. We need someone that understands that and will actually do what they need to do. Public benefit, every development, money towards public and emergency services, because it's vital. It's vital. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Darren?
Thank you. So, as I said earlier in the night, that I was frustrated with the mayor not including the council and other departments in his weekly meetings about city planning. It's really frustrating. And one of the things that I want to touch on real quick is the tax break. And I want everybody to understand, and I'm going to use Monroe Street, Procopio's building as an example. It was a lot of land that we were getting $30,000 a year in taxes. We did give a tax break. And the mayor was 100% in favor of the tax break, but then when he started seeing the pushback from some citizens and some labor groups in the city, locked himself in his office and he left it up to us, the council, to make that tough decision. Now, when we made that tough decision, because of the building that's there, it's going to be $7.5 million in taxes. And that's going to keep increasing every single year over that 7-year period that we gave the tax break to, instead of the $250,000 a year. So that does support our police and our fire department. In the last 5.5 years since I've been council president, because of the relationships that the council has been building with developers coming into the city, we have brought in over $12 million into our budget. That's why we have $28 million sitting in our reserve account. And the way to address the issues that you're talking about, public safety, it's called linkage. Anytime a developer is coming to do something in the city of Lynn, we've begun discussions with all developers and property owners that they have to pay for a new fire station in the areas that they're doing, or a new police station, or a combined public safety building with new equipment in it.
Thank you, Darren. All right, this question, we're going to start with Michael. Given Lynn has one of the highest tax rates for commercial properties in the Commonwealth, currently, as candidates who already hold a political office, what have you done to help the small business community in Lynn? And if you become mayor, how do you plan on giving more support to our city's small businesses?
I think it's important to shop local, and I say it often, and it's vital. And one of the things that really upset me is when I met with Mike Procopio, and we talked about the development on Monroe Street. I asked him, why didn't he use local entities within the development? And he didn't know who Full Color was, which is a company just right down the street, and they do print, which is important. Wayne Alarm. What's your alarm system? It's not Wayne Alarm. New Angle Glass Company? You didn't know? Come on, like, honest to God, we need someone in City Hall fighting for our small businesses and selling them. It's vital. It's crazy that we had that situation, and it shouldn't be that way. So we need to support local businesses, shop local, and that's vital. That's very much important. And I represent a lot of these small businesses as a lawyer. I love driving down the street with my kids and pointing to different establishments and say, Daddy represents that company. They love it. This is my home. This has always been my home. So the fact that a kid from Lynn can represent these businesses and watch them prosper with the legal advocacy and the legal advice that I give them is great. I love it. So yeah, we need to promote businesses within our city, and we need to do so more often. We need to do so with our developers, the ones that are building here in our city. We need to talk more about just the different things that we have to offer. I know that over the past 2 days, fluff has been big on Facebook right now because of Kyle. And I love the fact that I was able to share a picture of me in Berlin, Germany with the fluff. I went there, and on the back of it, it says Lynn, Massachusetts. So I was able to show off to my friends over there that, listen, this is a Lynn company. I'm proud. And we need to have a mayor that does that. And that's the mayor I will be. Thank you.
Thank you. Darren?
Thank you. Small businesses, I've always said, are the backbone of the city of Lynn, and we again, are obligated to help them. So one of the ways of doing that is by bringing development into the city that's going to bring more disposable incomes, that's going to support these businesses. I agree that we have to do a better job, and it starts right at the very top with the mayor, and that's exactly what I'll do. That anytime a developer is coming into Lynn, I will try to get them, and I have tried to get them, as the council has, to use city businesses, whether it be Wayne Alarm, who's just an unbelievable success story that's here in the city of Lynn. I've been in there, I've toured his building, I've met his employees, and he provides good, high-paying jobs. One of the problems is that a lot of these small businesses that are in the city, they can't afford to pay more than minimum wage because they don't have enough support of the community in those businesses. So one of the ways that we came up with to support those businesses was by using the auditorium. As I said earlier, we were talking about 80 shows before the pandemic, more than 80 shows. So you're talking on average 2 or 3 nights a week that 12 to 1,500 people, as many as 2,100 people, are frequenting the downtown businesses, the restaurants and the bars. You can't get into Rossetti's. You can't get into O'Sullivan's. You can't get into any of the restaurants, Old Neighbor, Old Time, or anybody, unless you make a reservation. That's one way that the city has been and should continue to support our businesses, working with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Jared?
Thank you. Yes, I think I have a very strong record of supporting small businesses in the city of Lynn. I got started in Lynn founding a legal aid practice right up the street on Union Street that provides free legal help to low-income entrepreneurs and small businesses in support of community growth, and worked with dozens of small businesses, providing free legal help, answering their questions, removing some of those barriers to growth in support of the kind of inclusive opportunities that we're looking for. I've worked very closely with the North Shore Latino Business Association over the years. I serve on their board. I've helped the association. I've helped a lot of the association's members, and I'm really proud of the work that we've done together in the city of Lynn. I've done a lot of work with Entrepreneurship for All, which is another organization that's focused specifically on inclusive entrepreneurship and helping folks start a business, navigate the process, answering those questions, and making it inclusive. And I've taught the class that they do for their accelerator for small businesses on legal issues in English and in Spanish. I currently, in my day job, I'm a professor at Northeastern at the law school, and I run a clinic that provides free legal help to small businesses, including Lynn businesses. And one of the ways I gave back during the pandemic is with the clinic. We partnered with the city of Boston and the city of Lynn to offer a legal help desk for small businesses that were struggling, that had questions on the reopening guidelines, on how to negotiate with their landlord because they were having trouble paying the rent, with the questions about navigating the financial assistance applications. And we worked with Lynn businesses in answering those questions and helping them when they were struggling. And so I would be proud to carry that record to City Hall and some of those lessons too about how to reach those small businesses that don't know where to turn. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, this question is for, we're going to start with Darren. How will you slow or stop gentrification in Lynn and make affordable housing for Lynn residents?
Education. It's the simplest, easy way to do it. We're not going to do it by asking developers to build a percentage of their units to make them affordable housing. It doesn't work. You can read any survey on affordable housing, and the biggest issue with affordable housing, I've said it 3 or 4 times tonight, is there are not enough federal or state programs that support it. Washington Street is an example, the Gateway Project. It took several years to build that, and it's done through many sources, whether it be federal, state, or a tax break that the city gave them, private and housing authority. It took several years for that. Kings Lynn is another one that it took many, many years in order for that to happen. If you look at Somerville, and there's a perfect example, that they had a program of affordable housing. Now people can't afford to live there because the burden falls back not just on the taxpayers that own single-family homes, but it also falls on the renters because somebody has to make up the loss for the developer or for the city in taxes or wherever it may be. So my firm belief, because everybody that especially in the immigrant community, from people I'm talking to, they want the same hopes and dreams that every American does, home ownership. I say we got to come up with a program that creates home ownership. We got to work with people. I said earlier, we're obligated to help a family, whether it's a single-parent household or a 2-parent household, where they're only making $45,000 a year. You can put whatever you want in a book. You can say the community was involved in the housing production plan. Less than 600 people were involved in it. That's less than 0.009% of the population.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jared?
Thank you. Yeah, so part of addressing the risk of displacement is the creation of affordable housing. And inclusionary zoning is one of those tools. And we know that inclusionary zoning works. Cities around the Commonwealth have used this, adopted this tool. It's one tool. It's an ask of developers to be sure, but it's a proven tool that has created units in other parts of the Commonwealth. And we're not just talking about Boston and Cambridge and Somerville. Quincy has inclusionary zoning. Lowell has inclusionary zoning. Peer cities have inclusionary zoning. This was clearly established in the housing production plan, and it's a document that is an affordable housing survey that's saying that inclusionary zoning is one of those tools that will result in the creation of affordable housing. It's just a tool, though. It's not going to solve the entire issue with half the city being cost burdened by the cost of housing. So there's other tools, other steps that we can take. One of the important one is the creation of an affordable housing trust fund, which other cities have, is a way to give the city more flexibility in creating opportunities for affordable housing. There's some great recommendations in the Housing Lynn Plan about supporting accessibility to home ownership and supporting aspiring homeowners who want to get started in the city of Lynn. Another great recommendation from the Housing Lynn Plan is doing an equity impact assessment for new development to think from an equity lens about what impact the development is going to have on the community. This is another tool that we have to address the fact that we want to grow. We want to grow as a community, but we want to make sure that the people here now are included in that growth. And absolutely, the cost of housing is one part of the bigger picture, but it affects the other parts too. When you have students who are in homes that are unstable because of the cost of housing, that affects their learning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael.
Thank you. And again, I'm going to talk from personal experience, not from reading something. So by the time I was 11 years old, we moved 7 times. I didn't get stability until I was 12 years old and moved in with my dad. And by the time I turned 14, he bought his first house on Ford Street. And we had ownership of something, which is important. It adds so much to a family unit. Community input is extremely important. And we require that with the new developments of schools where the community comes in and they talk about their desires and whatnot. We need to have that same thing for all development within our city. Let the community know and have input before it goes before anyone else. It's important. So we're talking about slowing or stopping gentrification, and we need to provide opportunities. The city should not be in the business of picking winners or losers in this city. We need to get out of that business. We need to have an equitable approach where we give the opportunities to every resident. When I say every ward, every resident, every business, I mean that. We can't be picking the winners and losers in the city anymore. It's vital to understand that adult education can be the change in a family's success. It's so important. And we have the tools, we have the buildings. We can do it. And one of the things that I hate hearing is, we've never done it before. That's not a good response. Or we tried it a long time ago and it didn't work. Well, let's look at what you did and try to come up with a different path. What we're doing now is not working. We have to do it right. We have to go in it with an approach that includes educating our adults so they can get middle-skilled careers, so we can have a society that functions and we have healthy family units, because that's what we all want. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so this next question Jared will lead. Many residents are asking for change. What 2 things that are you currently in practice you would most like to see changed during your term as mayor? What are 2 things that are currently in practice that's going on in the city that you would like to see changed during your term as mayor?
Great. So what I'm gonna start with one area of change that I think is really important and overdue is bringing more diversity to City Hall in hiring. And that includes the public schools as well. It's an issue that we've been working on in the public schools. I think we have a strong plan in place to be continuing to hire and retain staff of color. And that includes recruitment and reaching out to aspiring educators of color and attracting them to the district. It also includes retention and supporting the educators of color that we have in the current system, because over time, if you improve retention, then you're going to improve the overall diversity of the staff. It includes building a really strong pipeline of talent from the city of Lynn, which we know is diverse, to the people that end up in those positions. And ultimately, that's in everybody's interest to have Lynn students grow up, want to come back, give back to the city, and be in the teaching role. And we have some great partnerships that are in place to try to create that pipeline to do that, working with North Shore Community College and Salem State to create that kind of pipeline. So taking those kinds of strategies, working with the city's new diversity, equity, and inclusion officer position that I strongly support. I see a lot of potential for the city, working with the city's personnel director, and coming up with a plan to how to address diversity in City Hall, because ultimately that will allow public agencies to do their job better, to reflect the diversity of the community that we're serving. And they're also good jobs. And so it's helping the Lynn residents that we have now, the diverse community, find their way into those good jobs. So, diversity is one of those priorities. The question called for two, and so I'll say language access is another one. That's one I've talked about tonight as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Michael?
Thank you. Great question. There are two things that I'll work on that I feel as though there's an issue with our city, is access. I know that Mr. Nicholson had talked about working with small businesses in our communities several years ago, and that's a good thing. But businesses today still have an issue with opening up in our city. My cousin's trying to open up a place on Essex Street at the old Welsh's flower place. And it was so difficult for him to know what to do and who to talk to. And even some people that he spoke to didn't know how to respond. So accessibility is important. We need City Hall to be accessible, which means it works. You go in, and you don't have to go to 9 or 10 different places. That's not how it's like in other city halls, just so you know. Lynn is very unique with when you go. There are normally people that are you go, there's the one stop, they get you the information you need, and you move on. City Hall needs to be like that. And the second thing I would do, and I've been speaking to a few other people about this, is making our budget more user-friendly so we can understand what it means. It's important for the community to know where their money's going. So there's a system that's out there that makes every single resident more proficient in what the budget is and where the money's going. Because you can see what's most important to your city based off of where the money is going. And if you don't like it, you can speak up. But if you get if you go on the website right now and try to look up the budget, it's a PDF, so you can't search it. You have to look at all the pages. And some of the pages, you're like, why is this even in there? It makes absolutely no sense why we can't have a budget that is accessible and easy to understand for our residents, because it's their money that we have responsibility over. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. A quick example of that, I experienced that run around at City Hall last week, and it was just a simple task of paying my excise tax on a new vehicle I got, and then I had to go to one office, and then I had to go to the other office to file an abatement on the car I traded in. I mean, that needs to be, I agree 100%, streamline City Hall, please. So, Darren?
Thank you. Well, the first thing I'd do is I'd stop behind door meetings, closed door meetings that the mayor's been conducting on a weekly basis. I'd include all city departments as well as representatives from the city council to sit in on those meetings. City council does have a few jobs that we're responsible for. All of them have been women that we've hired. 3 of them are Latino women, and the 3 women all speak Spanish. So we're addressing the problems in the city, in City Hall, with showing the faces of the community. getting the community more involved in the decision-making. As I said earlier, we may not all agree, but if I'm the mayor, I still represent you. You deserve a seat at the table. Every neighborhood has different issues. Every group of people that live here have different issues. And I'm going to give you an example. I had 2 neighborhood meetings, one up in Ward 1 and one in the downtown area in the same week. And the biggest issue that a lot of the people were having up in the Ward 1, it wasn't their major issue, but what was one of their biggest was the geese. They were going crap on their lawn. And that's a big issue to the people that live there. And then when we were downtown, the big issue downtown was the drug dealers and the prostitution and the seniors that are having to walk on the dark streets in the downtown area. So those are things that I would work on and clean up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with Michael. Do you plan to involve residents in the decision-making process in our city? If so, how?
I love that question. Again, when I say a voice for you, and I mean it. If you look at my 4-year history on the school committee, you'll see that I included the community. One of the things that I actually asked the mayor to do when I first got on was to create a subcommittee that was specific to community. Because we have, schools without PTOs or PTAs. That should not be a thing. Parents should be involved in their schools. We need to be utilizing voices. It's vital. Some of the people we have in the city are brilliant. Like literally, everyone has something to offer. I tell this to everybody that I meet. Everyone has value. It's so important to hear that, but it's true. So a voice for you is not just some random slogan. I really mean it. That dome that you see that's missing a piece is you. And there will be community input. And I said it before. There's going to be monthly meetings through each ward where they can come and speak directly to the mayor because that's access. When I have politicians call me and try to give me their cell phone, I don't want that. How is that equitable if I have your cell phone and everyone else doesn't? That's not fair. It's access. And we need to make sure that the community has access to the people that they put in those places. It's vital. And I talk about this. People say, oh, well, I'm not in charge. Like, the election's corrupt and it doesn't matter if I vote or not. It does matter. Because if you look at just the school committee or the council, what other job can you pick someone else's coworkers? Think about it. Your vote matters. So keep that in mind. And when we have an election on September 14th, come out and vote. But community input is vital for the success and the progress, for the positive changes that the city of Lynn needs, and that will be a forefront of my administration, like it has been. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Darren?
I thought I started with that.
No.
Didn't you ask me about what I would change?
Yeah, you were the third one for that, but this question's
Do you plan to involve residents in the decision-making process?
Oh, I'm sorry, okay, yep. Absolutely, I always have involved citizens. As I said earlier, we had several meetings about Marshall Middle School before we sent the RFP out. When we were building the new school, and the talk was that the residents needed a new school on that side of the city. Before I even sat down with any politicians, I started talking with the neighbors. And we started looking at a site. So when they created a committee to pick the site in the city, we had a whole different idea. We didn't go along with what the committee wanted. The sites they were looking at were English High School. And they weren't looking at the site on Brookline Street because they felt it was too small. So we forced them, the neighbors did in that area, take a look at it. It transformed that entire neighborhood. You had 3 vacant buildings that were in that area. You had the old Nisson's Bakery, the Lynn Plastics building. You had the old waterbed factory there. There were 3 drug houses on that street, and there was a gang house on that street. And it's changed so dramatically because of neighbor involvement in that neighborhood. When I first became a counselor, I'd say at least 75% of the houses on Brookline Street, Columbia Ave, Timpson Street were up for sale. And now you're seeing people that have lived there for 30, 40, 50 years that decided to stay in that neighborhood. At first, some of the neighbors were opposed to putting the school there. For the most part, other than early morning drop-off or at the end of the day, which is a pain in the neck for about 15 or 20 minutes, but most people like having the school there. It's transformed that entire neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared?
Great. So yeah, absolutely. Including people, including the community in decision making would be a big priority. And when we want to think about how to improve inclusion, we should be thinking about how do we reduce the barrier to participation. Because I think people care about the community, want to be involved. Let's make that easy and bring them in. So one barrier to participation is around technology. And if people are having a hard time making a physical meeting, making the information accessible, making the ability to participate, using technology easy is an important part of sort of encouraging that participation, making the process inclusive. So I mentioned the need to update the city's website. We've made some progress in certain boards and committees having meetings of the option to participate by Zoom, participate remotely for those folks that they can't be in the room for whatever reason. Maybe it's childcare, maybe it's health issues or mobility issues, wherever it is. So technology is a part of making the process more inclusive. The language barriers is a part as well, making decision-making inclusive. If you have language access, then you make it easier for people to participate and to give their thoughts and input, and you can include them. So that absolutely is a part of it as well. I think there's another thing around inclusion and including people in decision-making, which is bringing the decisions to them, being really proactive about it. People are going to be less apt to participate if they feel like the decision has already been made. And so getting there earlier in the process and working to find where people are that you could explain what's going on. So, I mentioned the opportunity to collaborate with multi-service businesses. I think that's a real potential to sort of reach different communities. Another source of potential partners to collaborate, to reach people where they're at, are working with churches and the role that religious institutions play in the community and who have a population that they're working with. Thank you.
I'm going to skip this question because it's pretty much been answered already by all 3 of you. It's about diversity in City Hall, so I think we kind of covered that a little bit, right? Because it's 8:45. And we still haven't asked this is the last question. What experience and knowledge are you bringing to the table that would better qualify you as mayor of our city than your opponents? And we're going to start that question with City Council President Darren Cyr.
16 years of being on the city council, 5.5 being a council president, numerous neighborhood meetings, knowing what the pulse is of the city, working with department heads, the relationships that I've built, knowing what the process is, understanding and reading our city charter, our budgets. As I said earlier, our school budget is 2/3 of our city budget. The buildings in our city, 50% of them in the school system, which is 14, by the way, are over 100 years old. Knowing what it takes to fix our roads, looking for the funds to do that, knowing that you may live on a street that you feel is being neglected, but trying to be fair to everybody in the community, knowing that there are problems in our city, throughout our city, in all the different neighborhoods and wards. There are so many nationalities, so many religions. We are the most diverse city, I believe, in the world. I have lived here for 62 years, my entire life. I graduated from Lynn Tech. My wife graduated from English High School, from classical. She'd kill me if she ever heard me say that. Both my boys graduated from English. So, I mean, I have family friends that have lived here for many years, and I have many new friends that have just moved here in the last several to 10 years. But I have an understanding of what the city needs. I've seen the problems from flooding throughout our neighborhoods, water and sewer project that's going on right now in Westland. I experienced it when it was going on in Eastland back in the 90s. Thank you.
Thank you. We have about
10 minutes.
like 10 minutes, 14 minutes or so left. So next on that question would be Jared.
Thank you. Yeah, so definitely I would say the experience I bring, that I think I bring a unique blend of experience. First on school issues. I have deep experience on school issues, having served 3 terms on the Lynn School Committee. My day job, I'm a professor at Northeastern Higher Education. I also have deep experience on city issues, like housing and economic development, from my work as a lawyer and as a law professor, and I think that's a unique blend of experience that I bring. Something else that I'd say is the fact that I speak Spanish. We have a large population in the city that prefers Spanish, and able to reach that population directly. Another thing that I would say is that, you know, I bring a fresh perspective, having done this work on certain types of issues, not just in Lynn, but with other cities as well, on housing and economic development. But I also have a record of achieving results right here in Lynn. I have a strong record of achieving results on the school committee. I started a wrestling team in Lynn. I saw an experience that was missing from the city and put together a team to make it happen and to make a difference. I helped develop a program that helps, that's based out of Lynn Tech, for students around the district to learn job skills after school, and sort of leveraging the resources that we have at Lynn Tech. And so, you know, I think that bringing that experience, the fact that I speak Spanish, and the record of results I have, shows that I have the ability to deliver here and now for people, and then also the ability to work towards a longer term vision. And the will to include the community as we develop that vision together, and then the ability to implement that vision so that we're creating a better Lynn for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Thank you. Aside from, you know, growing up here and actually going to the schools, I have a better understanding, obviously, of those things because I've experienced it. Again, I went to 7 schools, which is a lot, but I've experienced it. So I'm not telling you these responses from what I've read or what I've heard. I'm telling you from what I've been through. I can tell you, as a 15-year small business owner here in the city, that there are some things that just aren't good ideas, like having some sort of requirement for our taxi drivers to only speak English and putting out a Spanish-speaking taxi business out of business. It's not good. So I can tell you that being inclusive is a good thing, and actually getting community input is a good thing. So not including your colleagues on a really important production plan is a bad thing. So I have 15 years of being a small business owner. 10 years ago, when we in 2008, we had the financial collapse in our country, and they came out with the CFPB, which is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. 10 years ago, I was working at my law practice, at the one I was working at, to reform and have these financial institutions in compliance. And those are 2 things our city desperately needs: reform and compliance. You heard earlier today about us not complying with net school spending. That's a big issue. It costs us money. We have issues within our school department. I'm a special education attorney. One of the things that I did when I got in was, do we need to have a focus on special ed? It's important. Now we see that focus, and it's important. Now we see an equitable budget approach. That just didn't happen. He's been on the school committee 2 years longer than I have, and I pushed the past 4 years to make substantial change where we're not hiring people just because we know them. We're hiring people because there's a purpose for that position. And that's what I will bring with my experience to City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Okay. All right.
So this next segment, what we will have here is questions from the candidates. I will ask the question from the candidate, and they will have to answer it first, the person who asked the question, and then we will follow it by the other two candidates. This one is from Michael Satterwhite.
It's the same question we just had, but
Oh,
Oh,
okay, so please list your work history, non-political, and,
I guess we can talk about non-political, that's fine.
okay, and how the history helps make you qualified to be mayor. Please list your biggest accomplishments and regrets in your work career.
Thank you. Sue, I'll answer it first.
Okay.
Okay, great. So I graduated high school in 2003, and right after that, I got a job at Sears Credit, and I worked there until they closed down in 2004. And I started working at a law firm for attorney William Harris in North Andover. I worked there for a few months, and then I was promoted to supervisor, working with over 100 employees within the practice. That gave me the ability to know what a budget is at a young age, and to know that I had X amount of dollars to spend within a certain time frame, and that was important. I worked for that particular family for 7 years. And in 2006, I bought my first house, and I ended up leaving one of my jobs, and I went to school. So I ended up finishing all my degrees in under 5 years, including my law degree. In 2011, I started working for Attorney Cohen in Salem, Massachusetts, which focuses on those the CFPB and compliance and reforms like I talked about earlier today. And one of the other areas which I loved was animal law. So it was great to be able to represent families that had some issues with their pets. In 2014, I went full-time as my own practicing attorney at my own practice. And I've been doing special education law for the past 7 years. In addition to that, I advocate and actually practice in court. So I'm not saying I'm an attorney just to say it. I'm an actual litigator where I advocate for people. In addition to that, I'm a mediator and a conciliator. You need to have practiced law for 5 years in order to get that particular credential. So not everybody can have that. So it's important to understand that advocacy is vital in City Hall, and we need someone fighting for the people, and that's what I'll do. And the past 3 or 4 years, I've been representing a large union and their members, and it's been a wonderful experience. My biggest accomplishment, obviously, is opening up my own practice, which was a great thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Darren, you're next.
Thank you. I've lived in Lynn for 62 years. I've been involved in everything from Little Leagues to youth soccer, PTA, my church council. I've always given back to the city. My sons were fifth generation, graduating from Avon High School on Eastern Ave, which in some ways is a cool thing, but it's a 130-year-old building. That's unsatisfactory. And I'm using that as part of my experience, knowing that. I've always worked 2 jobs my entire life. I've always paid union dues to a union my entire life. As a city councilor back in 2008, I had people crying on my shoulder because the bank was coming, taking their house every single day, knowing the experiences of them and their needs, trying to find housing for families that were being kicked out onto the street. Nobody cared about them. I did. The last 2 years, working with the Salvation Army and my fellow councilors, providing 1,000 boxes of meals every single day to our senior population, delivering meals, over 500 people a day coming, getting a box of food, which provided 35 meals a day. Didn't matter where they were coming from, there was a need. Didn't matter who they were. Working in Pat McManus's office back in the 90s, in his department. I built my own house. I drew the plans for my own house. I have no college education. I'm just like most of the people that live in Lynn. I have a high school education, that I had talents that I didn't even know I had, and those teachers drew them out of me. And I use them to this day.
Thank you. Jared?
Thank you. Yeah, so my current role, I'm a professor at Northeastern at the law school, and I mentioned I manage a clinic that provides free legal help to small businesses, and I teach a course that goes along with that. One of the things we did in the pandemic, as I mentioned, we partnered with the city of Boston and the city of Lynn to work with struggling small businesses. Before that, before the current role, I worked at a law firm in Boston called Latham and Watkins. They're a global firm, and the work that I did was specifically with startups in Boston, like venture-backed startups. Particularly in the technology and the life sciences industry. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about the potential, the idea of trying to tap into that part of the economy in a way that would benefit Lynn. Before that, I started a legal aid practice right up here on Union Street at Northeast Legal Aid on a fellowship that I had got while I was in law school to provide free legal help to low-income entrepreneurs and small businesses in support of community growth. But before that, when I was in law school, I was the executive director of the Harvard Legal Aid Bureau, which is a student-run legal services organization at Harvard that provides free legal help on civil needs. So things like housing, family law, wage theft. And so I managed a student organization and provided that kind of legal help in housing court. And working with people in defending tenants and also homeowners that were being evicted after a foreclosure. Prior to that, I worked in management consulting at McKinsey in New York and Mexico City. So I worked there right out of college, and I worked in financial services and media telecom. And it was that year in Mexico where I was, in Mexico City, living there, working there, immersed in the community, where I felt like I was really able to improve my Spanish and experience to see the economy from a different perspective, to live that experience of being in a foreign country and not knowing my way around. I can still remember it took me a full day to pay my taxes. I didn't know where to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. So this next question is submitted by school committee member, attorney Jared Nicholson. So you'll be the first one to answer your own question. What are your priorities for public transportation in Lynn?
Well, I want to say thank you for the great question because... So, I think this is one of the examples of sort of an approach that I think the mayor needs to bring into, to make the most of the resources that we have, and then also to make the case for the resources that we need, because the mayor doesn't determine what public transportation necessarily looks like, but they're part of the team, they're part of the effort to make the case for what public transportation improvements need to happen. So, one improvement that I think is really a top priority is the electrification of the commuter rail. I take the commuter rail to work. I'm a big fan of the commuter rail. For one reason is I met my wife on the commuter rail. Electrifying the commuter rail, it's an environmental justice issue. It'll be cleaner, it'll be quicker, you'll get better service, more frequent. It can be the kind of rapid transit that we really need in this community. Another priority will be to fix the crumbling MBTA station. This station in the downtown is just unacceptable. It's an eyesore, it's a safety hazard, needs to be addressed, and we need to be really pushing that case that the MBTA station in Central Square be fixed, be upgraded. Another priority, an ongoing priority for the city, I think, is the ferry service. That pilot was never given the full opportunity to succeed. If you're going to develop a new transportation option, you've got to have it for a while so that people can build their lives around it. And people never got the opportunity to do that. And ferry transportation works really well on the South Shore. There's no reason why it couldn't work here. The Blue Line is another long-term priority. If that's going to happen, it's going to happen in a long time. It takes a while, but we can continue to ask for it while we push for these near-term priorities, like the electrification of the commuter rail. And then bus transit's really important and needs to be continued improvement as part of that public transportation picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. So the next candidate to answer the question will be Darren.
Thank you. So, 45 years I've been hearing about the Blue Line. It's not here. Back in the 90s, I remember Senator coming here and giving us $100,000 for another study Kerry to figure out if we needed it. We all know we need the blue line. The reality is, we'll be talking about it in 50 years again. Hopefully, I'll still be here. I doubt it, but hopefully. The ferry, absolutely. One of the things I'd be doing is going over and seeing the governor, knocking on his door, going up to the State House, working with him. The current mayor that we have now is chairman of the Public Transit Committee. So we never saw the blue line. Electrification of the train tracks, you're looking at 15 to 25 years. Why? Because the bridge that goes by the GE is 15 feet below the flood line because of all the global warming. So I'd be constantly going over and working with the governor, working with our state delegation, trying to get better services for the city of Lynn. I heard one of the candidates say earlier, why is Lynn always last? We are. We're always missing the train. I know there's $35 million that's on the table for the MBTA station right now to repair the parking garage as well as the MBTA station. And I hate saying this because I hate hearing it myself. People say to us, you have to be patient. I'm done being patient. I don't have a lot of years left. As I was at a meeting the other night, and Kathy over here was telling us she needs a senior center today because she won't be here in 20 years. Right, Kathy? We needed to hear from her tonight.
All right, Michael, your turn.
Thank you for the question. So for most people in our city, the commuter rail is not affordable. So my colleague could use the commuter rail all day long, but it's not something that most people can afford to do. When I was 16, I was homeless, and I had to work 3 jobs. I worked at McDonald's, Aeropostale, and I was working at Sears Credit. I had to get to these places. So how did I do it? Public transit. Those bus stops that I used to take to get to Salem, they're not there anymore. We don't have accessible stops in our city. You have to walk 2 miles to get a bus stop sometimes. And I see people every day running after a bus to try to catch it because the next one's not coming for an hour. These people are getting to work late and they're losing their jobs. That's an issue. So that's one of the things we can quickly fix. I know that we have wishes of the blue line, we have wishes of electrifying this and electrifying. Let's talk about the things that impact most of the people here in our city, okay? It's where are the bus stops, why are they moving, and what are we doing to advocate for them to be in areas where our population lives? Earlier, someone said that the population's 101,000. I don't believe that. It's definitely undercounted. It's much more. We see it. We live it. I'm speaking from actual experience, not from a report or from something that I heard. I used the public transportation. I did for years in order to live. And that's what a lot of families in our cities have to do now. Even the seniors, they were talking about the fact that public transportation is just not an option because they can't get to it. We need to use the data to justify to the MBTA and speak to them often to let them know that this is what makes or breaks a family here in our city. That's what I'll do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next segment is it's a lightning round, so get your paddles ready, gentlemen. Simply hold up the red paddle if you do not agree, so that'd be a no. Please hold up a green one if you do agree with these questions.
It's going to take 3 minutes.
It'll be quick, painless. So your young lady to my right is Marissa Pike.
Okay, the first question is, school is starting soon. Do you agree the students, teachers, and all workers in the school should be required to wear masks? Okay, thank you. The second question is, do you support the Black Lives Matter movement? Thank you. Third question, would you commit to keeping the precious cemetery land, woods, and reservoir lands safe from any future developments?
Can't be answered with a simple yes or no answer.
Thank you. The fourth question is, will you support the Affordable Housing Act?
The housing production plan or the,
Okay, yeah, we'll just skip that one. The fifth question is, recently Lynn approved $500,000 in the city's budget to create the alert team. Do you agree to continue to support this program?
what was the team?
The alert team, the unarmed response team. Thank you. The sixth question is, since 2000 changes to the city charter have been made by home rule petition by the state legislation, are you in favor of creating a citizen charter review committee?
It's not an easy yes or no.
Okay. The seventh question is, are the largest donors to your campaign representative of the majority of the people you would serve as mayors? Okay, the eighth question is, do you support the charter school's growth in Lynn? Okay, the ninth question is, currently we have one animal control officer who is rarely available. If you become mayor, do you agree to make a priority the city needs for bringing back additional animal control officers? Okay. The 10th question is, would you support a motion to raise and act Community Preservation Act in Lynn? It's actually preservation, not preservation.
Read it.
Would you support a motion to raise and enact Community Preservation Act in Lynn?
I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a tax increase would be the issue, so in the near term, probably not.
Okay, the 11th question is, do you agree the city should have recycling picked up on a weekly basis instead of every other week as it stands now? Weekly basis instead of every other week. Okay? And then last question is, will you support teaching about systemic racism in Lynn Public Schools? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, so right now we'd like to welcome all the candidates that are currently running for office in the city of Lynn to come forward. Come to the front, please. And in the meantime, we're going to ask the three of you to prepare your closing statements. You'll each have 3 minutes to do that. Please, you can stand in the front. Oh, we have a lot still. Yeah, he had to go.
He said don't put it near the speaker. So. There's wireless too. It's wireless.
All right, so we need a microphone. Yeah. Yeah, your name.
My name's Eric Dugan. I'm running for Lynn School Committee.
My name is Lenny Pena. I'm running for the Lynn School Committee.
My name is George Remetes. I'm running for Ward 3 Councilor.
And I'm Pastor Posan. I'm running for Lynn School Committee.
My name is Jose Encarnacion, and I'm running for City Council at large.
3 minutes for that.
My name is Daniel Richard, and I'm running for a school committee.
My name is Sandra Lopez, and running for a school committee.
My name is Elizabeth Figueroa, and I'm running for Ward 2, City Council.
Hi, my name is Joanna Capola, and I'm running for re-election to the Lynn School Committee.
Hi, everyone. My name is Natasha Madri. I'm running for City Council in Ward 4.
I thank all of you for hanging in here so long and thank you all. And if the candidates are ready, we can do
Closing statements. 2
2-minute
minutes.
closing statements, and then everybody, please enjoy coffee, desserts, talk to the candidates that they don't run on the floor and like them. And thank you all for coming very much.
Okay, we're going to start off with City Council President Darren Cyr. Closing statement, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, especially for sitting there for the last 3 hours. As I said earlier, I've lived in the city my entire life. I've experienced all the things that everybody has, from worrying about a job, how to pay my mortgage, how to pay my taxes, whether or not I can even put food on the table at some points. But as I said earlier, throughout my life, I've always had people around me that I could turn to, simply my neighbors. And I'm a firm believer in community input. I've lived here, like I said, for 62 years. I graduated from Lynn School, so did everybody in my family. I've created relationships with department heads, with city councils. I understand what the process is. I know about having to be patient to wait to get your street plowed or fixed, or whatever the matter may be. I've been involved in almost every single community project in the city for the last 16 years. I've pumped out people's cellars during rainstorms. I've plowed people's driveways and streets. I've gone and cut up the tree and taken it away from the front of the house that has gone down in a storm. As I said earlier, I've always been a boots and callus kind of guy. I'm hands-on. If I'm the mayor, I will be the mayor 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I will not be flying around the country to see how others do things in other cities. And I will continue to work on relationships with developers and with property owners in the city. As I said earlier, Lynn is always late. The train's already left the station. I've been doing the last 5.5 years, council president, is what the mayor should have been doing the last 4 years, building those relationships. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared?
Thank you, and thank you again to the concerned citizens of Lynn for this opportunity. Thank you, all of you, for being here. This has been a really hard 1.5 years for a lot of reasons. You know, the loved ones that we've lost, 220 in the city of Lynn. It's been hard for students being out of school, and for teachers, for educators, for families dealing with remote learning. It's been hard for frontline healthcare workers, like my wife and other essential workers who've been asked to do so much in the last 1.5 years to keep us safe and to keep us going. It's been hard for small businesses, like the small businesses that I worked with in my role at Northeastern, and the small businesses that you and I all know around the city of Lynn that have been hurt and have had to change what they do to be able to stay afloat, and the ones that we've lost. I'm running for mayor to provide the leadership that we need to recover and grow together. We need to continue to address the ongoing public health crisis that we have here in Lynn and around the country, around the world, and continue to respond and adapt as that changes, as that challenge evolves. We need to recover. We need to recover fully. We need to recover fairly to make up for the disproportionate impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on cities like Lynn. And we need to be ready to put our best foot forward to take advantage of the opportunity that we have in Lynn to grow. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that that growth is inclusive. I believe that I have the skills and experience to provide leadership for that kind of inclusive growth, and I ask for your vote for mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I have lived experiences here in the city, and it's important to get an honest response. No script, okay? This is from lived experiences. I can tell you And I can tell you that most of you can agree that it's been hard in our city for longer than a year and a half. It's been hard my entire life. And that's what we need to change. What we've seen with COVID has only exhibited what we've all known. The inequities in our city are so visible to those that it's impacting. 7 times. My story is not unique. My story is what lots of kids face. And if you're an educator, you'll agree. It's nuts. It's not just me. But I can relate to people. I can relate to our youth and inspire them to let them know that they don't have to continue a cycle. That this data, these reports that are put out that say the high likelihood of this person continuing this particular path is there, it doesn't have to apply to them. And it's teachers that are like the teachers in this room are what got me through my life. It's neighbors, like Darren said. But you had to experience that. That's what's important. So I've managed people. I've done budgets. I've given back to my city for longer than 26 years. I was one of the first recipients of the Citizenship and Community Service Award that was issued by the City of Lynn in 1999. Because I give back. 26 years working with seniors. 26 years. Those yellow footprints you see painted outside, I painted those. This is my city. I love this city. And I'm going to bring my experience, my background, my lived experience as well to communicate with the public to let them know that they have someone on their side. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, all 3 candidates. And I want to just say thank you to all your families, because we know that your families are very supportive of all 3 of you, and it's a big commitment, not just of you all, but your spouses and your families. So please join us for coffee and desserts, and thank you, everyone, for a wonderful evening. Good night.